Hello and welcome to today's episode. We will be discussing today Chrono Trigger, truly one of the goats of all time when it comes to video games. This is one of the games that, about as objectively as possible, I can confidently say that. Chrono Trigger was just an amazing game when it came out, and is still to this day beloved by so many people. And not only that, is sometimes with older games, for those of us that grew up, in the with video games in the 80s or 70s, 80s, and 90s and all, we have a lot of us can still have a lot of fond memories of these games here. But when someone that either didn't play these games back in the day or is on the younger side, and they go back to play some of these younger games, sometimes they don't hold up quite as well for them, right? Like maybe it does for us because we have all the nostalgia behind it, but not always for them. But Chrono Trigger is one of the games though that I can say that pretty much anyone that I've ever heard or seen that played this game, years after the fact that they never experienced it back then for one reason or the other, they still consider it not only as a good game, but truly one of the greatest games of all time. And that's, I feel, is like one of the testaments of just how great this game is. It was really like one of the, you can almost say like one of the Citizen Kanes of video games, back in the day, that, and just because of its lasting power, right, that it's still very relevant to this day. So if you're new here, what I do is I'll do a bit of a retrospective, a bit of a review, and a bit of just my overall thoughts and personal history with the game, and provide some feedback on where to play it and all, and go over the development of the game. And so, but I do this kind of more in a casual way. So I do some research on it, but ultimately, it's just the point of this podcast is just more that we're just having a conversation about video games, and so that's my hope, right? Is if you feel like you're just talking to one of your buddies about games. But before we get into Chrono Trigger, though, another thing that I do is that I have a little relay of gaming segment where I've picked out 7 games that I'll discuss. And the way I pick these games out is I've just been having an ongoing list on an Excel sheet that I keep adding to, and up to I think close to 1,800 games on there now. And then I just use a number generator, and then whatever 7 games I pick out, I'll discuss them here. So if I know if I have some personal history with the game, I'll do a little bit of a mini review on him. Or if I don't have any history, I'll talk about it as much as I can, and the likelihood of me potentially playing the game. And then afterwards is throughout the week, I will post a gameplay segment of some sort up on my YouTube channels for Arcade Amigo, along with also TikTok at Arcade Amigo. My goal of that is just sort of to create an ongoing, like a virtual digital library of where you can just get some bit of information on a video game. And so my hope is that as the days, weeks, and years go on, that I'll have a quite of an extensive list on there, right, of just games you can check out some video footage of, and to see if it's something that maybe interests you or just to relive some nostalgia. And then after that, I get into a bit of a modern gaming news. And so again, kind of like with my retrospectives that I do, it's a very casual approach to it. I do try to keep up as much as I can with modern gaming news, but I can only do so much given my schedule. So again, the purpose of this is just more to have a casual conversation with some things that come up in the in the video game industry. And then after that as well, I'll get into the main segment, which is again a bit of a deep dive on Chrono Trigger. Well, let's get into it now here with the relay of gaming segment. So I gotta get 7 games picked out here. And so the first one that I got up is for Heavy Rain. And so this game was developed by Quantic Dreams, and it came out on the PlayStation 3 originally. I want to say it was around. I know I talked about it in my retrospective some weeks back, but it was like somewhere around 2009, 2011, 12 or so, within that stretch right there on the PS3. And it was a game that came out when the PS3 was starting to get some really cool exclusives, and this was one of them. Yeah, because it wasn't just only getting an exclusive, but the variety of kind of games that were coming out was pretty cool. As this game is a bit more cinematic, more story-based, has a bit of action to it, I guess you could say, because of the QTE options that it gives you in it. But what makes this game really engaging is, well, it's a few things. It's several things actually, I should say. The graphics are really well done. The character models and all look pretty incredible, and the animations and everything and all definitely leans towards the realistic side, right? So I would say it would have probably been one of the more photorealistic games as possible, right? And all up until that point when it first came out, and the acting is, for the most part, pretty well done in it. The storytelling is pretty well done as well too. Considering also that because there's a lot of multiple paths that you can take in this game, right, depending on the story choices that you make, and that the story more or less feels pretty cohesive all the way through, I thought was pretty incredible. And and again, so the storytelling, the writing, and all for the most part, right, is pretty engaging, and also because it definitely feels like a crime thriller movie of some sort, right? And almost when I was playing the game, it reminded me a lot of like the movie Seven, and sort of it's not necessarily like the same kind of themes and all, but just the atmosphere to it, the detective work that you do, and also the music as well too, and so in this game, you take control of, let's see, I think it's 3 or 4 different characters, and so you kind of play out their scenarios, and then so the game kind of jumps back and forth between these characters. So if you've ever seen movies like, let's see, like 21 Grams, Babylon, Crash, where it kind of jumps between different characters, right, and they have their own stories and all, and then sort of how it all meshes together, right? That's sort of what this game is. And so I thought, like I said, right, the story was pretty cohesive all the way through. Some of the acting can be a little off, but overall, though, I thought it was still pretty well done. And there's definitely some very tense moments in this game. One particular moment where I'll just say one of the main characters in the game is getting told what to do over, I think, like a phone call, and it's it's pretty intense. And also the way that they do that again with the acting, the cinematography to it, the direction, and then also the button prompts on how you got to press them and all, I thought was pretty creative at the time. And so definitely if you like story-based games, excuse me, I would say that this is one of the better ones out there. And right now, probably the easier way to play it is on the like you can buy it on the it was on the PlayStation 3, and then I got a bit of a remaster on the PlayStation 4, just kind of cleaned up the graphics a bit. And so then that one I'm pretty sure you can still buy digitally on the PlayStation storefront, backwards compatible on the PlayStation 5. Or you could also get it on Steam. Although I will say this though, just a heads up, while it runs pretty well as far as I can tell on the Steam Deck, the game has certain things that you need to do with like the controller for like motion control, and I couldn't figure out how to make it work on the Steam Deck. So just FYI, because if I recall right, at least last time I checked, because I remember I bought it on there because it was for cheap, and it said verified. But then as I started trying to do certain parts of the game, I wasn't able to, because again, the Steam Deck it wasn't able to read like the certain control motions that you need to make, right? Like say, like if you have the dual stick or the DualShock 4 and such. And so just FYI on that, right? And if you do seek to try to seek out the Steam Deck version, maybe there's patches for it that you can download, right, to help with the controls. I'm not sure, but just heads up. But next one though is kind of continuing on for the World Cup season that we're in, and I'm going way back on this one. And honestly, I picked this one just because it's just I have a lot of nostalgia for it. So this one actually I didn't randomly select. It was one that I just purposely selected, and that is for her going way back to the Sega Master System. And it's a soccer game that came out there. At least it was called in the States Great Soccer. And I just remember this game. Growing up, my family was really into soccer. And so when we got the Sega Master System, I think it might have been actually my dad that might have wanted to get this game. And so it's, I remember the front cover of it, where again, Sega Master System games, at least the earlier ones, it was just like a white grid with black lines. And then at the bottom left, it just had some kind of like a small little clip art of some sort. And this one, it just had like a leg kicking a soccer ball, and that was it. The game, the graphics, the characters look a little chibi style, and it's kind of cute, and all. You can select, I believe it was 8 teams from let's see, Japan, USA, Great Britain, Argentina, Brazil, Italy, England. I forgot who else, but the game, it's for being back then, it was actually we had a lot of fun with it. Again, a lot of it maybe has to do with that. It's just a lot of nostalgia, right? But it's the little song that plays right as you're playing the game is still stuck to my head in these days. And again, it's very basic by today's standards, and the gameplay is okay. But I just had a lot of fun memories of this, and thought it'd be fun to post some video game footage of this game here, again in celebration here of the World Cup season that we're in. But next up, though, is Virtua Fighter 5 Final Showdown. And so this one here is a game that came out originally on on the PlayStation. Well, actually, let me back up. So Virtua Fighter 5 came out in the arcades, and then it came out originally on the PlayStation 3. But then they got like an updated version, so kind of like think of it like the Championship Edition, like Street Fighter 2 games were doing back in the day, where it added new characters, a few new modes, and all. And Virtua Fighter 5 is just an excellent game all the way around. I mean, this game has been ongoing to this day. It actually got another re-release fairly recently, where they kind of improved the graphics some and all. But this one was the first sort of update that they did to it, and more or less still running on the same graphics engine as originally came out in. But just overall, Virtua Fighter 5 is an excellent fighting game. And this one, again, I believe this one might have come out in the arcades. I'm not sure. But then, like I said, it came out on the PlayStation 3 and also the Xbox 360, which will be the version that I'll be playing. And I mean, Virtua Fighter, they don't. There's like they make really kind of incremental but very crucial improvements to the gameplay that isn't something that is like really flashy and all from like one entry to the other, but it just makes it just so much better to play and all. And I mean, Virtua Fighter 5 is just an outstanding fighting game, my favorite 3D fighting game of all time. Well, for Virtua Fighter 5 overall, right, I guess I would say probably the Ultimate Showdown version, right, the more recent one that has come out. But just Virtua Fighter 5 in general, it's such a well-played fighting game, and I'm so glad that the series is making a comeback. And again, for me personally, I feel like even though Virtua Fighter 5 doesn't seem to be the most flashiest, most popular fighting game, I think the people that have gone into it really appreciate it for the techniques that it has in it, on how you can really, get good in this game, and just the overall finely polished gameplay. And I mean, the fact that, again, right, this game came out in, I think like in 2005 in the arcades, and it's still getting re-releases to this day, I think it speaks volumes to just how important this game is to the fighting game community. Because again, I don't think Virtua Fighter is one of the more popular ones, although I think with this new game that's coming out, I think it might get a resurgence in popularity. But the people that have played it, though, I think really appreciate it. And yeah, I mean, Virtua Fighter, the series, has always remained my favorite 3D fighting game of all time. And this is just another excellent entry in that amazing fighting game franchise. But next up is for Mega Man 7. And so this game originally came out on the Super Nintendo. And so this game came out a little bit later, as I'm pretty sure on this, I could be wrong, but I want to say that the first Mega Man game that came out on the Super Nintendo was Mega Man X. Now, I'm not too familiar with the Mega Man X series. I know I really need to play those games. I mean, I played some of them. I played a bit of part of Mega Man X, and then I played a few levels of Mega Man X4. And while I think they're really incredible games, but my understanding, they are like a spin-off series, right? But continuing on with the main series, so Mega Man X was the first game that came out on the Super Nintendo, as Mega Man 1 through 6 were on the original Nintendo. So we got a bump up in graphics and, some gameplay enhancements, I would believe, and all. And I don't hear much about this one, though, so I don't know, I guess, just within the Mega Man community, how popular this game is. But it looks pretty nice, though, and all, and I'm sure it's overall a pretty well-played game. I just don't know where it falls in the overall list, right, of like favorite Mega Man games of all time. So it'll be interesting to check this game out and see if I can, at least form some kind of an opinion on the bit of gameplay footage that I'll capture for it. But next up is another Super Nintendo game, this one only by Konami, and I really enjoyed this game. This is a Super Nintendo game that I did get into back in the day, and that is for The Adventures of Batman and Robin. Now, back in the day, I was a huge fan of the animated Batman cartoons. I mean, I still am. I think they're some of the best animated cartoons that have come out here, at least here in the United States. And, Batman's voiced by the late and great Kevin Conroy. Mark Hamill does an excellent Joker, and just the overall cast is amazing. Just a great, if you've never seen these cartoons and you're a superhero fan, definitely owe it to yourself to check it out. It's some of the best animation you'll see out there. But this game here, so this is based on that cartoon, and so Konami did an excellent job of retaining the look of the cartoon right in this game, as everything really feels a lot like the animated series, and the music as well too. Also, right, is very reminiscent of the animated show, and this is the kind of music, right, that the Super Nintendo could really excel in. There are times where the music almost sounds CD quality, so they definitely really did a good job on that. And yeah, I mean, it's back in the day, this was probably one of the better Batman games. It really, quote unquote, makes you feel like Batman, and for what was allowed at the time, anyways. And by that, I mean that the game is, I guess it's like an action platformer, you can say, but it does mix up the gameplay some. So, like, for example, in stage 1, it's like a side-scrolling action beat 'em up. And then after that, it kind of goes into, I mean, it's still kind of like a side-scrolling, only now you're using your batarang. But then in the third level, you're in a museum trying to find the penguin, and you're solving puzzles, collecting key cards and all to try to make your way through this a bit of a maze of the museum. And then there's another level too, also where it's like a driving game, like a top-down driving game. So it really mixes things up a bit, and but it does it in a way where it's really fun, keeps you engaged throughout the levels, and each level is like the theme is that you're taking down one of the bad guys, right? So like again, the Joker, Poison Ivy, Two Face, the Penguin, and so forth, right? And what's cool though, also, is that each stage is pretty much based off of one of the episodes of the cartoon. And yeah, just an excellent game. I didn't quite beat this back in the day. I got stuck in a particular maze towards the later part of the game. But yeah, just I really enjoy it. Again, one of the better Batman games out there. And I wish this game would get a re-release, but I would assume because of the licensing and all, right, that just might be a bit of a nightmare to try to re-release it. I don't know how well it sold back in the day, because it did come out, let's see, this would have been in 1994, I believe. So, well, I mean, not too late into the Super Nintendo's lifetime, but I feel like I don't hear much about this game. But at the time, it was getting pretty good reviews on the magazines, and like I said, I really enjoyed it. It's Batman, right? So I mean, that would already have a fan following towards it. But I never hear much of it. So if you've never heard anything about it, highly recommend you go and check this game out. Really incredible. But you would probably have to resort to emulation, aside from like just picking up the original cart. As again, as far as I know, it never got a re-release anywhere else. So, but yeah, highly recommend this game if you're into like action platformers, obviously Batman games or superhero games in general. It's a really, or even Konami games, right? Because it definitely has a Konami feel about it. So, yeah, great game. But then the next one I have is for Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. And so this is a Fire Emblem game that came out on the GameCube. And, I don't know much about this game other than it's a Fire Emblem game, but it does seem also to be a bit of a fan favorite for the series. As far as like when they started going 3D, there was a lot of Fire Emblem games that came out originally and eventually on the Game Boy Advance, and then on the Game Boy or the Nintendo DS. But this one here is the one that came out on the GameCube, and so it'll be interesting to check out some footage for this one here. As again, it seems to be a bit of a fan favorite for a lot of people. And last but not least is for Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. So the one that I selected originally was one for the one that came out in 2022. I don't know if I have access to that one there. So if I don't, I will do the Call of Duty, the one that came out on the 360 and PS3 back in this would have been in 2009. So let's go ahead and go with that one there, because I know I have access to that one. But yeah, Call of Duty 2, honestly, probably one of, if not my favorite first-person shooter of all time. I really, and again, I'm talking about the single-player campaign. I never experienced it online. I know the online feature of it was really well-liked by a lot of people. So, you also get, so everything I'm going to say about this game, also know that, at least at the time, it had a really great multiplayer component, right, for people that were into that. But as far as single player goes, so I was already starting to get into the Call of Duty games. I really liked them for their single player campaign. And so the Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the first one, so the series kind of reinvented itself in a way where now we're going into, the more modernish times. And so that first one was really great. I really fell in love with it. I think just, being in a more modern setting really hooked me on the game more, as the story felt a little bit something like you would see like in a more recent action blockbuster movie. And that's the thing about it, right? It has a lot of great set pieces, a lot of great levels. The whole all gillied up, level is really incredible. And just a great cinematic experience. And so basically, if you wanted like a fun, kick-ass action games, Call of Duty games were the ones to go towards there at the time. That's why I'm kind of excited about this new one that's coming out. But anyway, so that was that one really great game. Well, and then they were coming out with a Call of Duty game each year, and so 2 years later, in 2011, they came out with this one, Modern Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. So it continues on from the story and the setting from the first one. Only now there's even, for me personally, I really like the stakes in this one more, as things, there's like some really grand epic moments in this one. And I was just surprised, right, with some of the set pieces in this game. And when it comes to like a game that is more based on realism, this game probably has some of the best set piece action moments ever in a video game. I mean, there was just times on this game where my floor was just on the floor, or my jaw was on the floor, like, holy crap, that is incredible. And I mean, I just have a blast playing this game all this time. The gameplay, Call of Duty had already pretty much perfected the gameplay, right? Where you have the really fast moving action, and then also the way you can aim down your sights, right? To have more accurate shots, and just the really responsive controls and all that. They'd already pretty much perfected that. So now it's a matter of like the setting that you're in and all. And I mean, there's really incredible moments in this game. And so it's a lot of fun. Again, very cinematic. It feels very much like a movie in a lot of ways. It has a few actors in it. It has what's Lance Henkerson, I believe is the actor's name. He plays a character in it. I think there's a few others too, also. But yeah, but just overall great game, and also it has one of the most controversial moments, at least for probably for me, the most controversial moment ever in a video game. If you don't know what it is, I don't want to spoil it. I mean, although I know it's kind of out there, right? It was really controversial back in the day, right? When this game first came out. I mean, there was a lot of like news stories about it, and so I would assume that it's one of those moments that I mean, even if you've never played the game, if you've been following video games to any extent, you probably know about it already. I won't spoil it here. I'll just say no Russian, right? And so then when you hear that in the game, or just know that you're in for a moment, right? That's can be pretty controversial. So much so that the game even gives you the option if you want to just skip that level entirely, right? And I remember when I was playing the game, I even felt a little bit uncomfortable playing it, right? I'm like, oh damn, we're doing this. But it definitely kind of hides up the stakes, right, of what you're up against, right, in the game. And just overall, I really enjoyed this game, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. Again, for its single player, I remember hearing that it had an incredible multiplayer too for people that were into that. So just overall, an amazing package. And it did get it came out on the 360, PC, and PS3 back in the day, but it did get a remastered version that came out, I believe, on the PC also. But then I know for sure on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox Series, or I'm sorry, Xbox One, but backwards compatible, right, on the Series X and the PlayStation 5. So yeah, definitely, if you into shooters and all, if you for some reason haven't played this game because it was extremely popular back then, highly recommend it. Well, let's get into it now with some modern gaming news. And so this one might be a little bit lighter than normal, just because there was so much information that came out from the Summer's Game Fest that I did a side podcast earlier in the week to try to cover all of that. So that sort of spilled out to stories that came out this week as well too. But I did piece together a few things here, right, to discuss here. But starting off with Crazy Taxi World Tour and generative AI. So on this one here, so Crazy Taxi Ride, people were very excited that it got announced. But, like most things nowadays in video games, it just can't seem to come out without some level of like controversy behind it. And so, excuse me. So from what I understand, let's see, here we go. So I jotted down this thing here. So with Crazy Taxi, so they started getting accused, right, and all of like having or using generative AI in the game. And so I'm just going to read this thing here that I saw online. So it's been a bit of a roller coaster. This one with Crazy Taxi World Tour has been announced, and and by all accounts, it looks great. But that was swiftly followed by the discovery that generative AI was used to some degree during its production. American publication Game Informer has managed to get a statement about this from Sega, and although it's fairly similar to what's on the game Steam page, there's a little bit more context. Here it is in full. So yeah, I think what happened was that on the Steam page, it said something like that there was some kind of like generative AI used on it, and so then that got people questioning that a lot. So then this is supposedly what was said from a representative of Sega. Um, let's see, at Sega Corporation, generative AI is available as an option support tool for developers, enabling our teams to focus more on the creative tasks and ultimately focus on what matters most, delivering better games to our consumers. Generative AI was used to support our teams during the development of background assets for Crazy Taxi World Tour. Assets generated were still subject to review by the development team. No AI was used in reference to the performance in the game. So, we've talked about already kind of extensively with AI and all. Companies are going to continue doing this. I think that, on paper, it kind of makes sense, right? I'm not, my thing with AI and all, it's like with most things, right? That few humans get their hands on, right? When it comes to new technology and all can usually be beneficial. It can be helpful. It's just that also new technology can lead to just a lot of temptation. And so what I mean by that is that when something is made easier, right? And I mean, that's kind of what we want a lot of times, right? Is to make our work easier and all. What is the unknown cost of that? Or maybe not unknown, but just what is the the con of that we're maybe sweeping under the rug, right? Just because the benefits, are just too alluring. And so what I mean by that is why create, from scratch, right? From your own mind, from, your own hard work, a concept of something when you could just plug it into Chat GPT, for example, right? And just have it do it for you. And so then if it becomes that easy, it's kind of hard to think that a lot of companies and developers won't continue leaning towards that direction, where we're getting more and more into an AI universe, right? When it comes to like a lot of creative endeavors, and I think that is a concern with a lot of the pushback on this, because let's just say, like, if you were using AI just for, like, try to take care of some of the more mundane tasks out of the way, right? Or even to speed up development, right? Because one of what's the biggest complaints a lot of gamers have had nowadays about game releases nowadays, it takes a long time for these games to release. So if AI speeds up that process, why not use AI, right? But again, we're going down a rabbit hole there that if we continue going down that direction, that everything's going to rely on AI. And then, what does that mean for just the overall, not only the video game industry, right, but just any artistic industry across the board. As I feel that well, actually, I don't know nowadays now, right? But I would hope that most people still want that human touch, right, when it comes to whatever art form it is that they're consuming. But and so I think that's been the pushback on this here, and I mean, it is what it is, and all. I mean, at least for this particular game, I'm still interested in it, right, and I will still hope to play it, but at the very least, right, and all, they're getting called out on it. AI, like I said, we've talked about it already. And extent, and just AI is a whole thing nowadays. Um, is going to continue on. Is the AI bubble going to burst? But even if, I feel personally, right, that even if the AI bubble does burst, AI has already become so much of a thing now that I can't see someone not continuing to pick up the mantle to keep trying to improve it and improve it to some extent, right? So I don't know, fellas. I think we're in this for the long haul with AI, and just something that we are going to have to learn to sort of, work around here. Now, I'm not saying there shouldn't be any pushback, right? Like if we're getting now, this is getting kind of out of video games and all, but like data centers and all, that community should be pushing back on things like that. But I feel like we're entering a future where AI is going to be even a bigger thing than it was before. I know I've been telling my daughters, like, I don't know to what extent. I was like, but you guys are going to have to deal with AI a lot more than I can. So just keep an eye out for like what looks real, what doesn't look real, right, and all, and use your intuition when it comes to that. So at the very least, and you can identify what is AI and what is not, and then hopefully that'll at least give you a bit of a baseline of, to how you're gonna have to deal with AI once you're an adult, right? Because I have no idea what that's gonna look like, So I'm just trying to at least prepare her as much as I can for it. And again, I'm not completely anti AI. I feel like it could have its benefits. It's just my concern always is just, you know when there's been new technology, humans usually tend to exploit it, and not always for the best reasons. Like with the job that I do, right? I hear a lot about like AI scams and fraud and things like that happening, right? That is on a whole nother level now from what was there before. And I mean that's always existed. It's just now it's on another scale, right? And can are we at another scale where we can adapt to it in a way where we can still have a level of control over it? As I guess my concern, right? Because there's always been fraud, there's always been scams, but we've still been able to. Not that people haven't been victims of it, obviously they have, but it's still been in a way where it's still controllable in a sense, right? Can humans still keep up with AI, right? To still that it's still kept at bay, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's I don't that's just my whole thought on that there. But then the other thing too, also related to Sega, is this is a bit of a smaller story, and it might turn into a nothing burger. but there is potentially a new Sega handheld coming out. Now, it's not quite as exciting as it may sound originally, but it's still kind of cool though if this does exist. So this is from our website here, I believe, Time Extension, I believe. But rumor surfaces of a Sega budget handheld for 2D games. So a Reddit link from an Australian electronics worker details a request for quotation from a Sega licensed partner like Tectoy or Act Games for a Vita-sized handheld with a 5-inch OLED screen, low-power ARM processor, limited storage, and physical cards using eMMC modules. Designed for 2D indie games and pixel art rather than heavy 3D, it aims to sidestep NAND shortages and offer fresh titles beyond Sonic releases. Retro fans love the idea of a $100 portable rival to Evercade or Analog Pocket, although skeptics see another mini Genesis cash grab, and Sega has not commented. So there you go. I don't know. That'd be cool, I guess, right? And it can be smart, right? Again, because with all these chip shortages that's going on, which we're going to get into that here in a bit. But it's, I guess it'd be kind of cool. But you know, I mean, if you're, my whole thing with Sega is, and I know nowadays it's kind of difficult, right? Again, because of these chip shortages and all. But my thing with Sega is like, we love the Genesis, and there's so many great games for it. I've talked about it before. That's probably my most nostalgic system out there, but I really want more re-releases of like Sega games from like the other platforms, like the Sega Master System, the Sega Saturn, the Sega Dreamcast, or even like a lot of their arcade games. That's what I want to see more of, like retro compilations. So if this does exist, I mean, really, what are they going to do with it? Just more Genesis games. It's kind of like where my thought goes to immediately, right on what kind of games would be put out for this. But again, not necessarily a bad thing, like if they're re-releasing like more obscure Genesis games, that'd be pretty cool. But I'm gonna think of like it's gonna eventually be Sonic and things like that, and I mean, like I said, those games are great. Don't get me wrong. It's just that we've had so many re-releases of them. Like, let's get some new Sega stuff, right? Because Sega is not just Sonic, guys. There's so many other good stuff that Sega has done before in the past, but they're just starting to, more and more, it's starting to get lost in time, and yeah, yeah. Anyways, but that thing might exist, so but that's about all the information I have on it. But thought it was kind of interesting, right, to at least make mention of it there. All right, but now we're getting into a bit of a Super Nintendo information, and so this got announced, and when I first saw the announcement, I was like, "Holy shit! Are they doing a Final Fantasy X like remake?" But no, what it is, it's so Final Fantasy X. So it's what 25th anniversary, and so the game is getting a bit of a re-release, and I don't know if it's just on the Switch too. Let's see, but anyway, they got announced on the Switch too. Let's see. Yeah, everything seems to say that it's just on the Switch too. Mm. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's only on the Switch too, but basically, it's getting a re-release. So, but it's the Final Fantasy X slash 10-2 HD remaster, and so it's getting a bit of a re-release. And so, what I understand, so let's see, the Switch 2 version will now include a toggle to turn on and off random encounters, as well as a high-speed mode for quicker battles. Both were highly requested features to have been a part of the past Final Fantasy remasters, but in this case, were previously only present in the PC version. So since its release, this package has been lauded as a great way to revisit both games in their definitive form, but this may be about the best version of classics yet to appear on a console. So not much difference, right? Other than those options there from the PC version, and then I guess a bit more better resolution. I mean, the game already looked pretty great on the HD remasters. The only thing I guess I wish they would have changed is so if you don't know anything about this, if you played this HD remaster version, having never played the PlayStation 2 version, you'll be fine with it. But if you had played the PlayStation 2 version, you'll notice that on some of the main cutscenes that the characters' face models they look a bit different, and that the ones on the PlayStation 2 were actually a bit better. So I wish maybe they would have changed that a bit, but my understanding is that somehow they lost a source code, and so they couldn't reconstruct those facial animations the way they did before. I wish that maybe they would have brought those back. If you get it on the PC, I've heard there are mods that you can do to try to replicate that look again, to to some extent, but but otherwise, from what it looks like, it's pretty much the same game, just maybe slightly higher resolution. I don't think the frame rate would change, but you get like those options to toggle on or off no encounters and speed up the gameplay, which honestly is kind of cool though, right? I will say like I do like using those features when I'm playing like old school RPGs, especially ones that I've beaten before and I just want to play them again. I think it's a pretty excellent option there. So there you go. But then also wanted to talk a little bit about going back to Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. Um, we already talked about it before, where my opinions of the game. I have a bit of a impression video or podcast somewhere on my channel on that. But then also that the game didn't sell that well. It sold 1 million copies, but that's between the Switch 1 and the Switch 2 versions. And so ultimately, financially, it's not doing that well. I've been critical of the game to an extent, but I've got a bit further in it. I've been, because I played it quite a bit at first, and then I sort of like, kind of fell off of it a bit. But I started picking it up again and playing it. And I think I'm at the last area now. And so I might try to just beat the game maybe tonight. But because I feel like I'm towards the end. But anyways, I gotta say, it's as I've been going through more of the game, I'm liking it. It's my least favorite Metroid Prime game. Not my least favorite overall Metroid game, and it's probably towards the bottom, honestly. But it's not bad though. I mean, it's good. But everything that I've said before about it though, where it doesn't feel like a Metroid game though, and all, and then the time that you spend fighting these green crystal is annoying. Because I think I'm at the area now where I really need to just collect a bunch of green crystal. Although I didn't double check to see where exactly I am exactly on how much I've collected already, but I have been because I know it's a bit of a pain to try to get them all at once towards the end. So I've been taking a lot of time just searching around the desert area, just getting a bunch of green crystals. So I would think I have a decent amount, right? But that is it is a bit time consuming. Um, but it's not bad though. The last the little area that I did, excuse me, just recently, I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. It's cool. The graphics look really great on it too also, and honestly what kind of sucked me back into the game a bit is I got a power up in it, and so I ended up going back to the Vault Forge area, so that's where you get your motorcycle thing at, and that's still one of the coolest Metroid stages ever with an amazing song. And when I was listening to that song again, I was like, damn, this song is just such a kick-ass track that it lured me back to want to play the game a little bit more. So sometimes I feel like the power of music in video games is a bit understated because that's what lured me to go back and to play the game a bit. It has nothing to do with the gameplay and all, but I was like, damn, that's such a cool song. And so they brought me back into that atmosphere, that just overall feel of the game, right? Of not just Metroid Prime 4, but just Metroid in general. Because, it's a composer that's been with Metroid for a while, and that is such a good fucking song. And I was like, yes. I was like, okay, I'm vibing to this again. Uh, it was funny. My daughter just wanted to hang out with me a little bit last night, and so I was kind of tired there on the couch. I was just scrolling through stuff on YouTube, and then I came across a channel that had just Metroid Prime 4 music on it, and it had that song. And I just kind of lied back for a bit, just kind of dozing off a bit. And I told my daughter, I was like, "Don't mind me. I'm just gonna vibe a little bit here to this song." And she's just looking at me like, "Okay, Dad." But yeah, such a good song. But anyways, that's kind of what lured me back to it. So, anyways, long story short, I'm almost done with the game, and that's what brought me back into it. And my opinion on this game has slightly improved a little bit. So, hmm. But the other thing too, also I wanted to talk a bit about. So, Star Fox had a demo that was released on the Nintendo eShop. So it's coming out towards the end of this month in June, and so I played it the other day. And so it lets you play the little cinematic at first, right? And then a training stage, which is actually very familiar if you've played the one on the Star Fox on the Nintendo 3DS, and then also the one of the not the first stage, but like the second stage where you're in the meteor, and a lot of it is very similar to Star Fox 64, but it's also kind of its own thing. And so I like it, right? I think it's pretty cool. And I'll definitely be picking up this game. And, yes, it does feel a little familiar to the original one. But again, I didn't really get into some of the more expanded features on it, right? And I have to see the whole game overall. But I will say this as someone that was a little skeptical about the look of the characters, they're not as bad as once I'm actually seeing them in motion and all. I definitely don't mind them, is what I'll say, right? So yeah, so looking forward to it. It does kind of seem like more Star Fox, but I'm good with that since we really haven't had a really great Star Fox game since pretty much the until the 64 one, at least from what I played, anyways. So yeah, so looking forward to that towards the end of the month. Let's jump over to Xbox, though. So with Xbox, so I didn't know this, but they came out with a trailer, and actually, I think this is the first time pretty much anyone knew. But a few days ago, where Halo, so the campaign Evolve, which I'm actually really excited about now, it has a third-person mode, and so I saw a trailer where they were showing off some gameplay on it. It looks pretty cool, actually. I'll definitely check it out just to see what it's all about. But I don't see myself really playing this game this way. I just feel like the gameplay style of Halo is going to feel maybe a bit awkward in third person, but it's pretty cool though. Master Chief looks pretty cool. As you can see, behind the shoulder and all. Um, but yeah, so it has a third person mode. So I guess originally I thought that this Halo campaign Evolved was just going to be like another port basically, but just with Unreal Engine 5 graphics. But no, it seems like they're actually adding more to it. So I talked about it earlier on my previous podcast where they were introducing some levels that set the stage for the events that happened prior to the original one, and and then there's like some other modes in the game too, also, right? So it looks like they're expanding on it more, where it's not just going to be a simple, just basically another remake, right? Or I'm sorry, like another remaster almost, right? It looks like they're really trying to take their time to make this into a bit of a different experience, so that's cool. And yeah, looking forward to it. I'm starting to get excited to play this game here. So yeah, pretty cool. Also, another cool thing too is that the way that they recreated the title screen from the original one, it looks pretty sick. I was like, oh wow, that's cool. They they really just it's kind of the same thing where you have the Halo ring floating in the space and all, but just with the graphics of nowadays, and it looks cool. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. It's on one of the mini trailers that they've been releasing on it recently. But Xbox for all the goodwill that they built on the showcase that they had, just a few days ago. Oh man, there's been a lot of controversy that came out afterwards, right? Because and I get it. There's a lot of mixed messaging that they're putting out there, and so people are a little bit confused, frustrated with Xbox. And it kind of seems to be kind of more of the same, with what Phil Spencer and his team was doing. And so Asha, I think she was building a lot of goodwill, but at the end of the day, are they just sort of like trying to fluff us up, right, for ultimately to give us the same BS? And so they came out with a really extended statement on what their plans are and everything. And so I just figured I'd read over this here. It's pretty interesting. It's a bit long, but I thought it was pretty a lot of good information on here. And so apparently this was a message that was sent to the Xbox employees globally. All right, so let's go here. So this is from Asha Sharma and then Matt Booty. But team, so over the first 100 days together, we have started to revive Xbox. Our platform teams have already shipped more updates in the last 100 days than during the prior year combined. Now we have more active partners on Xbox than ever before. Our Game Pass team is set to work fixing our offerings, and after 8+ months of decline, our services started to grow again. And through Player Voice, we have a 24/7 channel to directly hear from players, creators, and developers. With the Xbox Game Showcase and the return of FanFest, we brought together hundreds of millions of fans globally. We introduced exclusives with Gears of War E-Day in 2026 and Clockwork Revolution in 2027. Players can continue to expect signature exclusives from us every year. In parallel, Playground Games reminded us that established franchises can have incredible new heights. These results are early, but they demonstrate that is what is possible when we move faster, stay close to our community, and align behind a shared vision. We have made mistakes and will continue to make them, but what matters is that we listen, learn, and adjust the course when needed. Remember, our fans are rooting for us. Now we start the next 100 days. Now, as we start the next 100 days, it is important to have both optimism and realism as we work to reset the business. Here are the realities that we need to navigate. So this is where it gets interesting here, because this is not only for Xbox. This is honestly just video games in general in a lot of these cases here that they go over here. So number one, Over 1 billion players choose to play Xbox and our games each year, for a total of 72 billion hours across console, PC, mobile, and streaming, excluding much of China and a few other properties. Our franchises are also among the largest and most beloved globally and are now breaking records in TV and film. Going forward, our competition is attention. There is more great games, TV series, franchises, creators, content formats, apps, etc., than ever before. We will end this fiscal year at about 3% accountability margin down year over year, excluding Activision Blizzard King. Over the past 5 years, we have spent over 20 billion on ongoing investments in our current content platform and a hardware subsidiary, but our annual revenue has declined nearly half a billion during that time. Going forward, this cannot continue. We are in a hardware component crisis. When I joined as CEO in February, the price we paid for console storage components was over 2 times as high as we paid last fall. These costs have since doubled again. As we plan for the 2027 holiday season, we expect another significant increase, taking us over 5 times the price we paid only 2 years earlier. Memory costs have followed a broadly similar trajectory. While the entire industry is facing a component crisis, we believe we have been impacted more greatly than many of our peers due to the choices we've made over the last half decade. Ouch. No shade at Phil Spencer there, huh? We are currently unavailable to make as many consoles as players want to buy it, and we need a new business model and partnership for hardware as we remain committed to Helix. So number 4, we expanded our studio systems when we needed a pipeline of content to meet multiple strategies across subscription, streaming, and devices. In the process, we have found ourselves overextended as we executed on changing strategies in a landscape of more readily available content. We are the fortunate stewards of industry-defining franchises that have enormous potential and player demand, but we have not adequately funded them to compete and win. At the same time, as we saw this past weekend at Showcase, a reliable pipeline of first and third-party exclusives and new IPs are critical to our success. We need to reassess the balance between these and our investment priorities over the next 5 years. So number 5, our current platform infrastructure is not built for the battle ahead. Our systems are overly complex, spanning hundreds of dependencies, which hinder our ability to move fast. We've become too reliant on vendors to operate our systems and must become more self-reliant as an engineering culture to build for our future. We must increase the value we ship to players while decreasing the time it takes to do so. Going forward, we'll evolve and rebuild our stack and look at capabilities across all Xbox and potential M&A to help us win in the hardware, PC, mobile, and streaming. For some of you, these realities will be surprising and even frustrating to discover. We won't succeed by hiding hard truths, nor will we succeed by doing the same thing and expecting different results. Like the everyday wins mentally from the first 100 days, we will sprint to make progress against hardware, content, experience, and services together. Xbox is one of the few places where people can not just just play, but to connect with others to create memories. With console at the center of how our showcase experiences are defined, Windows as one of the largest gaming platforms in the world and incredible games under our roof as one of the largest publishers in the world, we have the foundation in place. Let's reset for a stronger Xbox and build the number one gaming and entertainment company. Asha and Matt. Well, that's a lot there. And given, basically from people that are kind of in the know more, Microsoft's the end of the fiscal year for them, I think it's also that ends on June 30th, so at the end of this month. The expectation is that there's going to be a lot of layoffs, right? It's almost certain that there's going to be a lot of layoffs. And so that's going to hit Microsoft kind of hard because, if they're going back to exclusives, which makes sense, right? They're obviously missing out on a lot of revenue. Something's got to go. Is it going to be just layoffs just across the board for Microsoft? Or is it going to be certain studio closures, right? That they've acquired, right? Some of the ones, one of the main ones that I kept seeing popping up, right? Again, this is not confirmed or anything, It's just speculation is that companies like Double Fine might get the axe, right, of some sort, or they might find a way to maybe buy themselves out or something like that. But so Double Fine, so they're the team behind like the Psychonauts series. And so some of the other smaller studios, I mean, I would say almost Ninja Theory, but they got that Senua game coming out next year. So I don't know. I guess we're probably going to hear a bunch of layoffs, after the end of this month, so starting in July sometime. And so, I mean, you know, I've said it before. If anything positive that can come out of this, and that's a big if, with everything that Asha and her team is doing now, probably going to take a while to sort out, because everything that was done before this is I mean it just takes a while, right? And I mean, we all kind of speculated it, but to kind of hear this information out in the open now, I mean, Xbox was really making a lot of big mistakes, right? And again, the only reason Xbox as a brand is still able to stay alive is because of Microsoft's deep pocketbooks. Any other company would have floundered, a long time ago, right? But Microsoft can take the hit because they're, uh, they're it's a an incredibly rich company, and so it'll kind of suck to hear what ends up happening, right? Because again, we're anticipating there's going to be some layoffs and all, and so that's very unfortunate. But part of the, I hate to say it, but it's just business too, also. And even though again, Microsoft, they're probably have probably trillions of dollars. I mean, Jesus, this company is like incredibly rich, right? So it's kind of unfortunate that it's like, what the hell are you guys doing, right, with this money? But such is the way things are. And but I guess we'll see, right? But the other thing that kind of leads into, and I was going to get into this also with the PlayStation 6, but I'll just kind of tie it all together here. So they're already saying, right, that they're struggling to even get Project Helix off the ground because of all these component parts and all that are just getting really expensive. Now they say that they're still committed to it, but that also leads into like PlayStation 6 as well too. Because I think I heard some rumors and all that there was rumblings that that might get delayed out even further, or that potentially that it just, video game consoles might just start going the way of like cell phones, right? Like some kind of an upgrade instead of like a brand new console experience, or we might even be looking at subscription services and all of some sort, right? And again, this is all just speculation at this time, so nothing is set in stone. But given what they're saying about how expensive it is to make these games, where they're not quite 100% sure how they're going to do it right now and all, kind of leads you to believe that there might be some really drastic changes coming in the, here in the near future. I was even hearing also, adding to this here, everything that Asha said, some people were coming out saying too also that a lot of like Xbox executives are floating the idea again about having ads in games, that it's the only viable way, right, to maintain, the business. And we've talked about that before, but it looks like they're reintroducing this idea again. So what would that look like, right? Like, are you, like if you're part of Game Pass or doing the subscription or cloud gaming, you're playing your game, and then like every so often, right, you get like a 10-second ad about like, I don't know, Coca-Cola or something. And if it gets to that, that'd be, oh man, that'd be such a buzzkill. And I don't think that the video game players will take as lightly to that, to say like let's say like moviegoers and all, or people that like watching shows and all, because we could accept that, especially like I know for my generation, right? Because we grew up watching, like, say, like if we're watching a movie on TV and then there's a commercial, right? Or we're watching our shows and there's a commercial. I think we've been kind of more accustomed to that. Video game players have never been accustomed to that. And I don't think that's something that we would put up with, right? At least I would hope not. Um, so if they do go that route, I'd be kind of curious to see what the backlash is going to be all about that, because that would be highly unfortunate, right? If we do start going the route of putting ads in video games, that's just, because also the nature of the video game is different, right? Because you're not passively watching, you're engaged in it. You're there in the middle of a, I don't know, like a Call of Duty firefight and all. You're duking it out. Maybe you have your buddies online or whatever, right? And all of a sudden, like, hey, have you tried the new Coca-Cola flavor or whatever the hell, right, commercials they decide to put? It's like, what the fuck? I could see like a lot of like rage quitting and broken controllers, broken TVs, and all. So it's not going to be pretty if they do go through with that. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but it is something that they've been throwing out there even more so now. So we're in for a weird future, guys. And so I don't know. It's interesting times coming up. But let's go over now to just a little bit of a PlayStation news that I had here. I didn't jot down a whole lot. actually just one thing really, but that's just for the PS Plus. So for games coming out in June, so like if you're subscribed to like a lot of their various different tiers that they have, there's actually some pretty cool stuff coming out though. There's one of the main games that's coming out for like the June game is Final Fantasy 16. I know that game was a little controversial, but I think it's an excellent game. I really do like Final Fantasy 16. But if you've never played it before and you do happen to be subscribed to PS Plus, well, there you go. Right? You get here's a good way to check it out. Like I said, I personally think it's really good. We're also getting Shadow X Sonic Generations. That's another cool game, right? And all that's coming out also on the service. And then also Kingdom Come Deliverance. There was also, I believe, a Life is Strange game. Excuse me, I think a farming game also. And then for the PlayStation Classics, the Guitar Man, they announced that during the Sony State of Play, but now it's coming out here, and so that I think I think they said in June is when it comes out. So not a bad offering there, right, for June, right, for if you aren't still subscribed to this service there. But let's now get into it with talking about Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger is truly one of the greatest games of all time. It's a game that I can almost say objectively as pretty much everyone that I've ever talked to that have played this game just really enjoys it. And not only for us that played it back in the day when it was first released back in 1995 on the Super Nintendo, but also people that have never played the game and are playing it for the first time more recently. And that's for people that are older, like myself, right? That even though maybe they didn't play the game, but they still have an understanding of like what those games were like back in the day, or even new game players or, younger players, right? That they're, didn't grow up with those kind of games and they still really appreciate this game. And that's for a number of different reasons that I'm going to go into here, but it's definitely one of the most timeless classics out there. No pun intended, considering the theme of the game with time traveling and all. And it was, a lot of it was helped by just a certain creative force that Squaresoft had at the time, as the company was known at then, and between geniuses of Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest came together and just created this absolute masterpiece. But let's go ahead and start getting into it here. And this is one game where I did play it at the time, even though I didn't have a Super Nintendo, because we had a friend that had it. And so when this game came out, we were hearing some hype about it back in the video game magazines. So we made sure to rent it, and we ended up actually renting it several times, and we didn't quite beat it back when I was a kid, but we got pretty far enough in it that it definitely gave me a really good impression of what this game's all about, and just absolutely fell in love with it. But let's get into it here. So for Chrono Trigger, so again, it came out in 1995, and it was developed and published by Square for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and it was the first installment in the Chrono series. So this game's plot follows a group of adventurers who travel across through time to prevent a global catastrophe. Now, this is what made it really special, right? Is again, it's just sometimes, people get together, great minds, get together and just create something beautiful. So the game's development team included 3 designers that Square dubbed the Dream Team. Hironobu Sakaguchi, so the creator of Square's Final Fantasy series, Yuji Horii, the creator of Enix's Dragon Quest series, and the late and great Akira Toriyama, so the character designer of Dragon Quest and also the author of the Dragon Ball manga series. So in addition, Takashi Tokita co-directed the game and co-wrote the scenario. Kazuhiko Aoki produced the game, while Masato Kato wrote most of the story. Let's see, Masato Kato, let me see what... let's see, what else has he done? Oh, okay, so he's got quite the resume. So it looks like he worked first for Tecmo with the Captain Tsuba and the Ninja Gaiden series. But then he went over to Square, and so that's where... So his first title was Chrono Trigger as a game story planner and scriptwriter. Wow. Let's see. So he's done Chrono Trigger, and so the story was drafted by Yuji Horii from what I'm reading here, but then he wrote the script for it. This Masato Kato guy, but he also did Radical Dreamers, Xenogears, Chrono Cross, Final Fantasy XI, and parts of Final Fantasy VII too. So He's been pretty, he's got quite the resume there for things that he's written for Square. But Chrono Trigger was critical and commercial success upon release, receiving multiple accolades from gaming publications, and is considered one of the fourth generation consoles gaming's most significant titles and one of the greatest video games ever made. Nintendo Power magazine describes aspects of the game as revolutionary, including its multiple endings, plot-related side quests, focusing on character development. Yeah, which is very true. So much about this game is just so well paced, and there's no filler in this game. But we'll get more into that here. Unique battle system and detailed graphics. The game's soundtrack, scored by Yasunori Mitsuda with assistance from veteran Final Fantasy composer Nobuo Uematsu, has been hailed as one of the best video game soundtracks of all time. Chrono Trigger was the second best-selling game of 1995 in Japan, and the various incarnations of the game have shipped more than 5 million copies worldwide. So not bad there for a JRPG, where, again, at the time when this game came out, JRPGs are starting to kind of become a thing, thanks to games coming out on the Super Nintendo, like from Enix and Squaresoft, but they weren't still quite the thing, right? Final Fantasy VII was what really changed that, but that wouldn't come out until another 2 years later. So considering how a bit of a niche genre JRPGs were still, this is pretty impressive still. So the game has been re-released on several other platforms with varying differences. A port by Tosei for the PlayStation was released only in Japan in 1999, which was later repackaged with a Final Fantasy IV port as Final Fantasy Chronicles that came out in 2001 exclusively in North America. And then there was a slightly enhanced Chrono Trigger ported again by Tosei, which was released for the Nintendo DS in Japan and North America in 2008 and in PAL regions in 2009. The game has also been ported to iMode, the Virtual Console, the PlayStation Network, iOS, and Android. In 2018, a higher resolution version was released for Windows via Steam. So it's been re-released, several times, but unfortunately, the game doesn't have more of a definitive version at the moment. Right now, we're all sort of waiting, right, and all that. There might be some sort of a remake coming out soon. That's been heavily rumored, but nothing's been set in stone yet. So not something that I would completely hold my breath on, right, that it's going to happen. But I mean, I would think that it would. The game is such a timeless classic, right, and all. And then because some of the ports, and I'll go over those here later, they're kind of a hit and miss, right? And so that's what I'm saying. It's like this game really needs a proper re-release of some sort to do it justice. But let's get into the gameplay here. As the combat system, while it's turn-based, right, we're using the ATB gauge from what the Final Fantasy games were starting to do up to this point, from Final Fantasy IV and up. So it uses that, but it kind of mixes things up a bit. So the Chrono Trigger features standard turn-based role-playing video game gameplay. The players control the protagonist and his companions in the game's two-dimensional world, consisting of various forests, cities, and dungeons. Navigation occurs via an overworld map, depicting the landscape from a scaled-down overhead view. Areas such as forests, cities, and similar places are depicted as more realistic scaled-down maps, in which players can converse with locals to procure items and services, solve puzzles and challenges, or encounter enemies. Chrono Trigger's gameplay deviates from that of traditional RPGs in that, rather than appearing in random encounters, many enemies are openly visible on field maps or lie in wait to ambush the party. Contact the enemy on a field map initiates the battle that occurs directly on the map rather than on a separate battle screen. And this is what made the game, I think, really fun for players, even maybe some people that aren't fans of RPGs. One of the main things that I hear about people that just don't like RPGs in general is the random encounters, right? It drives people nuts, right? And I kind of get it. It kind of does for me as well, too. And so this one, though, for the most part, you can choose if you're going to, pick a fight with an enemy. Most of the times you're going to want to anyways, right? Because you want to level up your characters. Otherwise, you might be a bit underpowered. But you do have that choice. There are a few moments where you do have to fight enemies because of a scripted event, that's going on. But otherwise, like I said, right and all, it's not random encounters. And even though you pretty much have to fight most of the enemies, right? So again, to be leveled up well, again, the fact that you can pick and choose when to fight, right? Instead of just randomly, right? You get that
the sudden surprise of like, the battle music playing and all of a sudden, oh shit, you're in a battle now, right? With most RPGs do. And so I think that was something that really eased players into this game here, right? And just made it just really user-friendly on that. I feel like that was a big deal, right, with this game. But players and enemies may use physical or magical attacks to wound targets during battle, and players may use items to heal or protect themselves. Each character and enemy has a certain number of hit points. Successful attacks reduce the character's hit points, which can be restored with potions and spells. When a playable character loses all hit points, they'll faint. If all characters fall in a battle, the game ends and must be restored from a previously saved chapter, except in specific storyline-related battles that allow or force the player to lose. Between battles, a player can equip their characters with weapons, armor, helmets, and accessories that provide special effects, such as increased power or defense against magic, and various consumable items can be used both in and out of battles. Items and equipments can be purchased in shops or found on field maps, often in treasure chests. By exploring new areas and fighting enemies, players progress through Chrono Trigger's story. And it's a very basic sort of like equipment setup, and that's what I like about it. So you have your weapon you can equip, you have your oh geez, I'm trying to blank here, some kind of an armor, if I recall right. God, I'm drawing a blank here. It's a bit limited, right, on what you so the armor and helmet, right? So okay, and so nothing too complex, right? And then also you get an accessory that is pretty easy to understand, right? Okay, like this accessory increases your strength, this accessory increases your accuracy, right? Things like that. So it's nothing too complex, right? And all. And that's another thing too that was kind of a product of its time, that a lot of game mechanics hadn't gotten too convoluted, right? Which we would start seeing in the next generation. But it's nice enough, though, right, that you still have a bit of customization that you can do for your character. So again, simplicity is this game's one of its biggest strengths, right? And I don't say that in a bad way. Let's see. All right, so Chrono Trigger uses an active time battle system, a recurring element from Square's Final Fantasy game series designed by Hiroyuki Ito for Final Fantasy IV, named Active Time Battle 2.0. Each character can take action in battle once a personal timer dependent on the character's speed statistic counts to 0. Magic and special physical techniques are handled through a system called Tex. Tex deplete a character's magic points, a numerical meter similar to hit points, and often have special areas of effect. So like some spells can damage monsters that are all kind of grouped together, while others can harm enemies if they're kind of like in line with each other. Enemies often change positions during battle, creating opportunities for tactical tech use. A unique feature of Chrono Trigger's tech system is that numerous cooperative techniques exist. Each character receives 8 personal techs, which can be used in conjunction with others to create double and triple techs for greater effect. For instance, Chrono's sword-spinning cyclone technique can be combined with Luca's flame toss to create a fire whirl. When characters with compatible techs have enough magic points available to perform their techniques, the game automatically displays a combo as an option. And yeah, definitely one of the funnest aspects of this game. It's a lot of fun to go through these texts here, right? And on just seeing all the cool, at the time, the graphical effects were pretty crazy. There's one in particular where I think it's one of the triple texts, right? So again, you have to wait for all the 3 characters' ATB gauges to fill up, and then it automatically displays on there, right? Which if you want to do like a combo of all of them, and there's one I remember where you can summon, and it's like this big old frog just kind of pounds down on the enemies and all. And there's a lot of other creative ones, right? It's a lot of fun to experiment with these here, and definitely helps, to level up your characters and all to kind of experiment with all of these there. It makes for a really fun battle system. But Chrono Trigger features several other distinct gameplay traits, including time travel. Players have access to 7 eras of the game's world history and past action affects future events. Throughout history, players find new allies, complete side quests, and search for keynote villains. Time travel is accomplished via portals and pillars of light called time gates, as well as a time machine named Epoch. E-P-O-C-H. I don't know if I'm saying that right. The game contains 12 unique endings, 13 in the DS, iOS, Android, and Steam versions. Oh, okay. The ending the player receives depends on when and how they reach and complete the game's final battle. The DS version of Chrono Trigger features a new ending that can be accessed from the end of time upon completion of the final dungeon and optional final boss. Chrono Trigger also introduces a New Game Plus option after completing the game that players may begin a new game with the same character, levels, techniques, and equipment, excluding money with which they ended the previous playthrough. That is pretty cool. I don't know if it was the first game that did this, but this has been a very appreciated feature. That even to this day, right? And a lot of games are still doing this, and I think a lot of it is thanks to this game. Because again, I don't know if it was the first one, but I think it was the first one at the very least that popularized it. Like, for example, been going through like the remake and Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth recently. And so I've been going through like I guess you can say like a New Game Plus, right? And all, where I've already beaten the game and I'm going through the game again with all my, experience points and stuff that I've already gained. And because I'm just kind of trying to get through the game, right, as more of a casual playthrough. So I'm not even using like the streamlined progression options that they've recently patched into the game. I'm just going off of my old save file, and it makes it a lot of fun, right? To revisit the game that way, where hey, I already did my time, I beat this game, and so the reward is that I can sort of not blow through it all the way, right? Because there's still a bit of challenge to it, but you have all your equipment and all, and so it just makes it a lot of fun to play that way. At least for me, I feel personally, and so yeah, it was Chrono Trigger was one of the first games that introduced us. Let's see. However, certain items central to the storyline are removed and must be found again, such as the Sword of Masamune. Let's see. And Square has employed the New Game Plus concept in later games, including Chrono Cross and Final Fantasy 15, among others. All right, so the story. Now, this is where the fun really. The story is just a lot of fun in this game too. Also, so Chrono Trigger takes place in an Earth-like world with eras such as prehistoric age, in which primitive humans and dinosaurs share the Earth. Middle Ages, replete with knights, monsters, and magic, and the post-apocalyptic future where destitute humans and sentient robots struggle to survive. The characters frequently time travel through time to obtain allies, gather equipment, and learn information to help them in their quest. The party also gains access to the End of Time, represented as Ear, which serves as a hub to travel back to other periods. The party eventually acquires a time machine vehicle known as the Wing of Time, nicknamed the Epoch. This default name can be changed by the player when the vehicle is acquired, though. But this vehicle is capable of time travel between any time period without having first to travel to the End of Time hub world. And so another big part of this here is the characters that just make this a lot of fun. Not only in their story, right? Some of them have like a pretty cool story and, backstory and all. But of course their design as well too, right? Again, Akira Toriyama, he's just, he just has a really... His characters are just very iconic, right? And if you know anything about Dragon Ball Z or the Dragon Quest games, that's where his more familiar work is going to be at. So this is going to be one of the things that he did that was outside of those two things, right? Because I'm sure Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Quest kept the man very busy, but this is something that he did off on the side, right? And all, because he was working with Yuji Horii, right? Who he had already worked with on Dragon Quest games, but his character designs are just really charming. They're really fun to look at, and just really brings out their personality by just in their looks alone, right? And not only just the character designs, but the variety of them as well too. And so we'll get into that here. So basically, Chrono Trigger has 6 playable characters plus 1 optional character, come from different eras of history. So Chrono Trigger begins in 1000 AD with Chrono, Marl, and Luca. Chrono is a silent protagonist, so that's very common with Dragon Quest games, and so they definitely put that aspect into this game here. So that's where. So it might go into it here in a little bit later with with the thing that I'm reading here, but just to kind of talk about it a little bit. Chrono Trigger, the reason I think it is so well beloved, because Final Fantasy games were really well beloved. Dragon Quest games were beloved, well, mainly in Japan at the time. Chrono Trigger, in my opinion, really is an almost perfect blending of both of them, right? And and that's, I think, was one of the things that made this game such a success too. Is like each of those series have a certain unique aspects about them that make them really good, and this game kind of combines both of them together. And so one of the things is the silent protagonist, which, you know, some people might not like too much, right? Maybe they like a protagonist that talks and all, but the reason why like a lot of Dragon Quest games do this, and to my understanding, is that it's sort of like to put you in the shoes of the character, right? So and so that carried over to this game here. Let's see, but even with him not talking though, his look and everything, and then also like a lot of like the animated gestures that they do really still give him a lot of personality, I feel. But he's a silent protagonist characterized as a fearless young man who wields a katana in battle. Marl, revealed to be Princess Nadia, lives in Guardia Castle. Actually, let me confirm here. I don't want to go into like too many spoilers. Okay, yeah. So she is at heart a princess who seeks independence from her royal identity. Luca is a childhood friend of Chrono and a mechanical genius. Her home is filled with laboratory equipment and machinery. From the era 2300 AD comes Robo, or Prometheus, design R-66Y. So he's a robot with a near human personality created to assist humans. And so, so you come across him in the future. And then when you travel back to 65 billion BC, so you meet up with Ayla. And so she is unmatched in raw strength, and she is a chief of a village there and leads her people against a certain species there. So I don't want to go too much more for spoilers. And so then the last two characters, it's a Frog. He's literally like a humanoid frog, and that's his name, Frog, and Magus. So Frog is from the 600 AD, so that's kind of more of a medieval era, and that you come across him here, right, to help him out on a certain plight that he has going on there. And then also you meet Magus, who he is an optional character. And so, well, like I said, I'll just leave it at that, right? A lot of this is going into spoiler territory here, so I'll kind of leave it off of that. So I'm going to just sum up the plot here. I don't want to read this and potentially give some spoilers. But basically, the game takes place and starts off in 1000 AD. So you can kind of look at it like almost like the present time. And let's see. So Chrono is, so he wakes up in his house, and then he's going over to a Millennium Fair that's taking place. And so as you're going about there, then you end up bumping into Marl, as she's walking around the place as well too. But the way you meet her is you bump into her, and so a pendant that she has falls down, and so then you help her find it, and then she's like, hey, let's join up and let's check out this Millennium Fair together. So you start hanging out, and then eventually you meet up with your friend Luca, who she's a bit of a, so like I said there earlier, like kind of like an inventor, a mechanical genius. And so her and her father have created this kind of like a teleporter device. And so she asks you if you want to volunteer to test it out. So you do, and everything goes well. But then Marl, who she's a bit of a free spirit, right? So she's like, I want to try. And so she does. But then something happens, though, where the portal machine kind of reacts to the pendant that she has. And so then she gets teleported to God knows where. And so then, the ever-brave Chrono decides to follow after her. So, he takes her pendant that was left on the ground, gets back in the portal, and gets transported to hopefully wherever Marl is at. And so that is what starts off this journey. Eventually what happened is that, they ended up going back in time. And so as you're going through all these different time periods, it's really cool to see how the world it's the same world, only how it changes, right? Given the time period that you're in. And so you meet, a lot of different new characters this way and all. And so that's part of the big charm of this game. It's just, the creativity in it on, as you're jumping between the different time periods here, and kind of makes it sort of like a anime's Back to the Future, really. And what I love about it is that with a lot of like time traveling tales is that it doesn't get too convoluted, right? It's actually the way it does time traveling is very simplified in a way. Again, simplicity is kind of one of this game's strengths, but in a way that's easy to understand, and it makes sense within the world that it's doing without you overthinking it, basically. It's kind of hard to explain, but there's just a certain charm to the way it tells its story and how, easy it is to understand, that it's kind of refreshing after, there's been a lot of like convoluted time traveling tales, right? So one of the more appreciated aspects of this game. And the other cool thing too also is as you're going through this world, there's little things here and there, right, and all that can ultimately affect on what ending you will get. As I said earlier, right, there can be up to 13 endings in the game, depending on which version you're playing. A lot of it has to do, as I said earlier, right, on how fast you get to the last boss, and then and I think, and then certain other aspects as well too. So most endings, I would say, right, you probably can't access unless after you've beaten the game at least once, right? I've beaten the game once, so I think the ending that I got is, it seemed pretty canon, right? It seems like it was a well done ending, and that concludes the game well. So because from my understanding, there's some endings there that are a bit more out of left field a little bit, and some more that are just kind of more for Easter egg kind of endings. So not all of them are like gonna be endings that really explore the story more in depth. Some of them are just kind of silly, but still though, definitely gives the game a lot of replayability value. Let's see. A lot of spoilers. Okay, all right, let's go into development. I know it's an old game, but still, I try to keep these retrospectives that I'm doing as spoiler-free as possible, because part of my goal is that if you are anybody that's listening to this, is to try to maybe encourage you to play a game that I'm talking about, but without spoiling it, right? I know this is a really old game, right, and all, but still, though, right? I think that's part of the charm of this game is that that you're experiencing the story, just going into it as blind as possible. But let's talk about the development, because this is where it's interesting here, right? And all considering everyone that was involved in making this game. So Chrono Trigger was conceived in October of 1992 by Hironobu Sakaguchi, so producer and creator of the Final Fantasy series, and Yuji Horii, writer, game designer, and creator of the Dragon Quest series, and Akira Toriyama, character designer of Dragon Quest and creator of the Dragon Ball manga series. Traveling to the United States to research computer graphics, the three that Square dubbed the Dream Team decided to create something that no one had done before, end quote. Toriyama's editor, Kazuhiko Torishima, later credited the concept to a fusion of Dragon Quest plus Final Fantasy and arranged Enix to lend Yuji Horii to Squaresoft for development. After spending over a year considering the difficulties of developing a new game, the three received a call from Kazuhiko Aoki, who offered to produce. The four met and spent 4 days brainstorming for the game. Square convened 50 to 60 developers, including scenario writer Masato Kato, whom Square designated story planner. Development started in early 1993. An uncredited Square employee suggested that the team develop a time travel themed game, which Kato initially opposed, fearing repetitive, dull gameplay. Kato and Horii then met several hours per day during the first year of development to write the game's plot. Horii designed the silent protagonist from the outset. Square intended to license the work under the Mana franchise and gave it a working title Maru Island, but Hiromichi Tanaka, the future producer of Chrono Cross, monitored Toriyama's early designs. The team hoped to release it on Nintendo's planned Super Famicom disk drive. When Nintendo canceled the project, Square reoriented the game for release on a Super Famicom cartridge and rebranded it as Chrono Trigger. Tanaka credited the ROM cartridge platform for enabling seamless transition to battles on the field map. While Chrono Trigger had been planned for a 24-bit megabit cartridge, Square ultimately chose a 32-bit megabit platform, enabling additional graphics and music. Torishima later reflected that at least one early version of the game had been scrapped. Aoki ultimately produced Chrono Trigger, while director credits were attributed to Akihiko Matsui, Yoshinori Kitase, okay, so he's the dude from Final Fantasy, and Takashi Tokita. Toriyama's designed the game's aesthetics, including characters, monsters, vehicles, and the look of each era. Masato Kato also contributed character ideas and designs. Kato planned to feature Gaspar as a playable character, and Toriyama sketched him, but he was cut in early development. The development staff studied the drawings of Toriyama and to approximate his style. Sakaguchi and Horii supervised. Sakaguchi was responsible for the game's overall system and contributed several monster ideas. Other notable designers included Tetsuya Takahashi, the game director, and Yasuyuki Honi, Tetsuya Nomura, and Yusuke Naora, who worked as field graphic artists. Yasuhiko Kamada programmed graphics and cited Ridley Scott's visual work and the Alien as inspiration for the game's lighting. Interesting. Kamada made the game's luminosity and color choice lay between that of Secret of Mana and the Final Fantasy series. Features originally intended to be used in Secret of Mana and Final Fantasy IV, or Final Fantasy IV, also under development at the time, were appropriated by the Chrono Trigger team. According to Tanaka, Secret of Mana, which itself originally intended to be Final Fantasy IV, was codenamed Chrono Trigger during development before being called Seiken Densetsu 2, or as it's known in Japan, but Secret of Mana here. And then the name Chrono Trigger was adopted for a new project. After its release, the development team of Final Fantasy VI was folded into the Chrono Trigger team. And so, yeah, and this stretch of Squaresoft was just incredible, right? And a big part of the reason why is just because they've had these people that are, from what it sounds like, working there with this company for a while, and they were just a very, from what it sounds like, right, from everything that I've read, not only on this game but on other Squaresoft RPGs at the time, it seemed like a very tightly knit crew, and I think because of working on this game too, I think this is where Squaresoft and Enix got a lot of familiarity with each other, and so that way there was sort of like this friendly competition going on between them, and ultimately that's why there was just an incredible output of games. So if you are on the younger side and you've maybe played some of the Final Fantasy games like 15 and then 16, and you're like, I don't know about this. What's the big deal about these games, right? Because I know those games have been controversial. If you're kind of on that side and you're like, what is it about these like Final Fantasy games, right, that people all really enjoy, or Squaresoft games in general? In the 90s, right, pretty much all the 90s, the output of games that these people were producing were just truly incredible, and makes for some of the all-time classics and the games that have inspired a lot of video games going forward. So even though you may not like some of the newer Final Fantasy games, there could be a lot of games that have come out maybe that you do enjoy that were heavily inspired by this era of games that were coming out from Squaresoft during this time, and Enix as well too. And so Naoki Hamaguchi, so the director of the Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, so he's co-director of Final Fantasy VII Remake and then director of Rebirth and then also Revelation. So he's been doing his rounds, doing interviews, right, all over the place, and so he's been providing a lot of information, right. And one of the questions that gets asked a lot of them is that, considering how long games take to develop nowadays, right, what is it about that with this remake trilogy that, for the most part, for as grand in scope of these games are, that they've been able to release them in a fairly small window of time, right? All things considered. I mean, Final Fantasy VII Remake was a fairly big game. Rebirth is an insanely huge game, right? With so much stuff to do. And Revelation seems like it's going to be potentially even bigger, right? So how were they able to crank these games out a lot? With the level of quality that they did, and then also with how fast they were able to bring them out, right? 3 years for today's game time development is pretty small, right? And so one of the things that he stated is that a lot of the team just stuck together. And so, if you think about it, if you've ever worked in a place where, if you've worked in a place that had just like a really bad turnover rate, and, you're kind of like you and a few others are maybe the only ones that are sticking around, it's kind of hard to find success because it's just, there's a lot of people that, you have to like try to mesh now with a new staff and all, right? And so sometimes that doesn't always work out. Where if you've ever worked in another place, though, where, you had your same coworkers and all for a while, assuming that you all, for the most part, got along, then there's a better level of like productivity, right? And so Not always. Square Enix has definitely got it through, or Squaresoft definitely has gone through its period, right, where they've changed staff and all that. But at least during this time, though, it seems like there was a lot of people that were because every time I see like the development of some of these games, I see a lot of the same names, right? Like Tetsuya Nomura, for example, right? He later would become a big figure for Square Soft and then, well, Square Enix now, and but he was like a director or like a graphics director here, right? And so. I think that just was really helped them out to just output these incredible games, and then also not only the quantity but also the quality as well too. And yeah, just an amazing time. But anyways, as I was noticing a lot of these names, I was like, I see these names a lot during this stretch of like amazing JRPGs that came out during this time, and it seemed like it's at the time it seemed like it was just a really tightly knit crew. That's my understanding of it, anyways. But Yuji Horii, so a fan of time travel fiction, such as the TV series The Time Tunnel, fostered a theme of time travel in his general story outline of Chrono Trigger with input from Akira Toriyama. Horii liked the scenario of the grandfather paradox surrounding Marl. Concerning story planning, Horii commented, "If there's a fairground, I just write that there's a fairground. I don't write down any of the details. Then the staff brainstorms and comes up with a variety of attractions to put in it." Horii also devised Lavos as the final boss, having wanted the final boss to be an ancient evil. Sakaguchi contributed some other minor elements, including the character Gato. He liked Marl's drama and reconciliation with her father. Masato Kato subsequently edited and completed the outline by writing the majority of the game's story, including all the events of the 12,000 BC era. He took pains to avoid what he describes as long string of errands, such as do this, take this, defeat these monsters, or plant this flag. Kato and other developers held a series of meetings to ensure continuity, usually attended by around 30 personnel. Kato and Horii initially proposed Chrono's death, although they intended he stay dead. The party would have to have retrieved an earlier living version for him to complete the quest. Let's see. Square deemed the scenario. Okay, actually, let me skip forward here. So Kato also devised the system of multiple endings because he could not branch the story out to different paths. So Yoshinori Katase and Takashi Tokita then wrote various subplots. They also devised an active time event logic system where you can move your character around during scenes, even when an NPC is talking to you. And with characters talking to different people and steering conversations in different directions, allowing each scene to have many permutations. Kato became friends with composer Yasunori Mitsuda during development, and they would collaborate on several future projects. Katsuhisa Higuchi programmed the battle system, which hosted combat on the map without transition to a special battleground, as most previous Square games have done. Higuchi noted extreme difficulty in loading battles properly without slowdowns or a brief black loading screen. The game's use of animated monster sprites consumed much more memory than previous Final Fantasy games, which used static enemy graphics. So, yeah, I feel like that in some cases, the enemies. So I'm going to take Final Fantasy VI, for example, right, which came out pretty just a little bit earlier than this game. I feel like that the detail in the enemy sprites are more detailed in Final Fantasy VI, for example, than Chrono Trigger. But Chrono Trigger, they animate more, and and then there's it doesn't have random battles and all that, right? So you kind of get different, basically, battle systems on each one, right? I guess that's what I'm trying to say on that. But Hironobu Sakaguchi likened the development of Chrono Trigger to playing around with Toriyama's universe, citing the inclusion of humorous sequences in the game that would have been impossible with something like Final Fantasy. Yes, and so again, that's a lot of that is just to Akira Toriyama's artwork. It's his style, and which has been already used in several games within the Dragon Quest series. They just have a certain, just when you look at the characters, they just look more fun, I guess is one way to put it. And and not that Chrono Trigger doesn't have like its drama and all. It's just that there's a bit more whimsical nature to them, and because of that, it gives this game a certain more of a lightheartedness to it. So I do agree with that statement that he said there. So when Square suggested a non-human playable character, developers created Frog by adapting one of Toriyama's sketches. The team created the End of Time to help players with hints, worrying that they might become stuck and need to consult the walkthrough. The game's testers had previously complained that Chrono Trigger was too difficult, as Horii explained. It's because we know too much. The developers think the game is just right, and they're being too soft. They're thinking from their own experience. The puzzles were the same. Lots of players didn't figure out things we thought they'd easily get. So Sakaguchi later cited the unusual desire of beta testers to play the game a second time or travel through time again as an affirmation of the New Game Plus feature. Whenever we could, we tried to make it so that a slight change in your behavior caused subtle differences in people's reactions, even down to the smallest details. I think the second playthrough will hold a whole new interest. Oh, so sorry. So that was a quote from Sakaguchi. So the game's reuse of locations due to time traveling made bug fixing difficult, as corrections would cause unintended consequences in other areas. Okay, now one of my favorite aspects of this game is the music. It's truly incredible by the composer. So Chrono Trigger was scored primarily by Yasunori Mitsuda, with contribution from veteran Final Fantasy composer Nobuo Uematsu and one track by Norika Matsuda. So Yasunori Matsuda. So he's for me, he's right up there with like Nobuo Uematsu. Just to kind of go over really quick on some of the other stuff that he's done. Xenogears, which to me has an incredible soundtrack as well too. Shadow Hearts and Chrono Cross. And let's see, what else has he done? So just kind of going a little bit over him, because I feel his music is just truly classic in this. So just going over a bit of this dude here. So Mitsuda was born in Tokuyama, Japan on January 21st of 1972 and was raised in the Kumaji district of Yamaguchi Preference. He took piano lessons beginning at the age of 5, but was more interested in sports at the time. He did not take music seriously, quitting by the age of 6. For a while, he wanted to become a professional golfer. By high school, Mitsuda wanted to become a music composer inspired by Vangelis' Blade Runner and Henry Mancini's The Pink Panther film scores. He became interested in PCs after his father bought him one, which was a rare item at the time. He started to program computer games and compose music for them, as well as take more technically oriented classics. After high school, Mitsuda decided to leave town and become independent. With encouragement from his father and sister, he moved to Tokyo and enrolled in the Junior College of Music. Despite the school's low prestige, Mitsuda received solid instruction from his professors, most of them practicing musicians, who would take Mitsuda to gigs with them to help carry and set up equipment. At the cost of being used for free physical labor, Mitsuda got a first-hand view of Japanese music world and valuable training both in and out of the classroom. As part of his college course, he was granted an intern position at the game development studio Wolf Team, studying under composer Motoi Sakuraba. With his school term ending, Mitsuda saw an advertisement for sound production at Square in a copy of Famitsu. With no plans as to what he wanted to do after school, he applied for the position and joined the company in 1992. Excuse me. So, although his official job was a composer, Mitsuda found himself working more as a sound engineer. So over the next 2 years, he created sound effects for Hanjuku Hero, Final Fantasy V, Secret of Mana, and Romancing Saga 2. In 1994, realizing that he would never get a chance to move up to a real composition duty without some drastic action and feeling concerned about his low pay, he gave Square's vice president, Hironobu Sakaguchi, an ultimatum. Let him compose or he would quit. Sakaguchi assigned the young musician to the team working on Chrono Trigger, telling him that after you finish it, maybe your salary will go up. Mitsuda was assigned as sole composer for the game, in the end creating 54 tracks for the final release. Mitsuda drove himself to work hard on the score, frequently working until he passed out, and would awake with ideas for songs such as the ending theme to the game. He worked himself so hard that he developed stomach ulcers and had to be hospitalized, which Nobuo Uematsu which led Nobuo Uematsu to finish the remaining tracks for him. Wow. Chrono Trigger proved a great success, and the soundtrack proved popular with fans. Mitsuda claims that his landmark title, which matured him, he attributes his success to folk and jazz music rather than the semi-orchestral style popular in game music at the time. So eventually, after Chrono Trigger, he composed a soundtrack for Front Mission Gun Hazard with Uematsu. And according to Uematsu, Mitsuda again worked so much that he eventually defecated blood out of stress and physical problems. Mitsuda worked on 3 more titles for Square: Tobo No. 1 and Radical Dreamers both in 1996 and Xenogears in 1998. Wow, I mean, he's definitely had an incredible work. He also did Xenosaga, the first one, Shadow Hearts, and Luminous Arc, among other several things. But yeah, I mean, geez, I mean, he looks like he definitely overstressed himself. But I mean, the Chrono Trigger soundtrack is definitely one of the most iconic in video games, and it's just always interesting to see, when I mean, that's how legends are made, right? You just put yourself out there and kind of, give it your all, and kind of, give yourself, not only somebody else, but also yourself, an ultimatum, right? Like, you're going to do this or this happens, right? And, that's how you become great. Also, but yeah, the soundtrack to this game is just absolutely incredible. So Mitsuda composed new music and drew on a personal collection of pieces composed over the previous 2 years. He reflected, so quote, "I wanted to create music that wouldn't fit into an established genre, music of an imaginary world. The game's director, Masato Kato, was my close friend, and so I'd always talk with him about the setting and the scene before going into writing. Mitsuda slept in his studio several nights and attributed certain pieces, such as the game's ending theme, Too Far Away Times, to inspiring dreams. He later attributed this song to an idea he was developing before Chrono Trigger, reflecting that the tune was made in dedication to a certain person with, so quote, a certain person with whom he wanted to share a generation, end quote. Oh, how sweet. He also tried to use leitmotifs, that's kind of a musical term, of the Chrono Trigger main theme to create a sense of consistency in the soundtrack. Mitsuda wrote each tune to be around 2 minutes long before repeating, unusual for Square games at the time. Mitsuda suffered a hard drive crash and lost around 48 tracks in progress. After Mitsuda contracted stomach ulcers, Uematsu joined the project to compose 10 pieces to finish the score. Mitsuda returned to the end to watch the ending with the staff before the game's release, crying upon seeing the finish scene. That's cool. So at the time of the game's release, the number of tracks and sound effects was unprecedented. The soundtrack spanned 3 discs in 1995 commercial pressing. Square also released a 1-disc acid jazz arrangement called The Brink of Time by Guido that year. The Brink of Time came about because Mitsuda wanted to do something that no one else had done, and he noted that acid jazz and its related genres were uncommon in the Japanese market. Mitsuda considers Chrono Trigger a landmark game which helped mature his talent. While Mitsuda later held that title piece with rough around the edges, he maintains that it had significant influence on his life as a composer. In 1999, Square produced another 1-disc soundtrack to complement the PlayStation release of the game, featuring orchestral tracks used in cutscenes. Tsuyoshi Sekito composed 4 new pieces for the game's bonus features, which weren't included on the soundtrack. Some fans were displeased with Mitsuda's absence in creating the port, whose instruments sometimes hourly differed from the original games. Mitsuda's arranged versions of music from the Chrono Trigger series play video game music concerts presenting the main theme, Frog's theme, and Too Far Away Times. He worked with Square Enix to ensure that the music for the DS would sound closer to the Super NES version. Mitsuda encouraged feedback about the game's soundtrack with contemporary children who he thought would expect full symphonic scores blaring out of their speakers. So fans who pre-ordered the DS version received the special music disc containing 2 orchestral arrangements of the game's music directed by Natsumi Kameoka. Square Enix has also held a random prize drawing for 2 signed copies of Chrono Trigger sheet music. Mitsuda expressed difficulty in selecting the tune for the orchestral melody, eventually picking a tune from each era and certain character themes. Mitsuda later wrote, so, quote, I feel that the way we interacted with music has changed greatly in the last 13 years, even for me. For better or for worse, I think it would be extremely difficult to create something as powerful as I did 13 years ago today. But instead, all I have learned in these 13 years allows me to compose something much more intricate. To be perfectly honest, I find it so hard to believe that songs from 13 years ago are loved this much. Keeping these feelings in mind, I hope to continue composing songs which are powerful and yet intricate. I hope that the extras like this bonus CD will help expand the world of Chrono Trigger, especially since we did a live recording. I hope there's an opportunity to release an album of some sort one day. So music from the game was performed live by the Tokyo Symphony Orchestra in 1996 at the Orchestral Grand Concert in Tokyo, Japan. A suite of music, including Chrono Trigger, is part of the Symphonic World Tour with Video Game Music Play, Video Game Symphony, where Mitsuda was in attendance for the concert's world premiere in Chicago on May 27, 2006. His suite of Chrono Trigger music, comprising Reminiscence, Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross, Time Scar, Frog's Theme, and Too Far Away Times, was performed. Mitsuda also appeared with the Eminence Symphony Orchestra as a special guest. Video Games Live also featured melodies from Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross. A melody of music from Chrono Trigger made one of the 4 suites of Symphonic Fantasies concerts in September of 2009, which was produced and created by the creators of Symphonic Game Music Concerts series, conducted by Arnie Roth. Square Enix re-released the game soundtrack along with a video interview of Mitsuda in July 2009. Frog's Theme and Robo Theme were among video game music performed during the 2020 Summer Olympics opening ceremony. Oh, wow. Oh, no, wait. I think I remember that. Yeah. Because I remember here, I was like, wait a minute, is that Chrono Trigger? In 2022, the main theme continued to feature in the set list of the 8-big band led by Charlie Rosin. All right, so the music is incredible in this game. It's just truly outstanding. All right, so the different releases of this game. So the team planned to release Chrono Trigger in late 1994, but the release was pushed back the following year. Early alpha versions of Chrono Trigger were demonstrated at the 1994 and 1995 V-Jump festivals in Japan. A few months prior to the game's release, Square shipped a beta version to magazine reviewers and Video Game Source for review. An unfinished build of the game dated November 17th of 1994. It contained unused music tracks, locations, and other features changed or removed from its final release, such as the dungeon named Singing Mountain and its eponymous tune. Some names were differed. The character Soy Saw / in the US version was known as Whiner, while Mayane or Flea in the US version was named Ketchupa. The ROM image for this early version was eventually uploaded to the internet, prompting fans to explore the document the game's differences, including 2 unused world map NPC character sprites and presumed additional sprites for certain non-playable characters. Around the game's release, Yuji Horii commented that Chrono Trigger went beyond the development team's expectation, and Hironobu Sakaguchi congratulated the game's graphic artists and field designers. Sakaguchi intended to perfect the sense of dancing you get from exploring Toriyama's worlds in the event that would make for a sequel. Chrono Trigger used a 32 megabit ROM cartridge with battery-packed RAM for save games, lacking special on-cartridge coprocessors. The Japanese release of Chrono Trigger included art for the game's ending and running counts of items in the player's menu status menu. Developers created the North American version before adding these features to the original build, inadvertently leaving in vestiges of Chrono Trigger's early development, such as the piece Singing Mountain. Hironobu Sakaguchi asked translator Ted Woosley to localize Chrono Trigger for English audiences and gave him roughly 30 days to work. Jesus. Lacking the help of modern translation team, he memorized scenarios and looked at drafts of commercial players' guides to put dialogue in context. Woolsey later reflected that he would have preferred 2.5 months and blames his rushed schedule on the prevailing attitude in Japan that games were children's toys rather than serious works. Some of his work was cut due to space constraints, though he still considered Chrono Trigger one of the most satisfying works he's ever worked on. Nintendo of America censored certain dialogue, including references to breastfeeding, consumption of alcohol, and religion. So yeah, Nintendo of America at the time specifically, they were censoring a lot of stuff. But the original Super NES edition of Chrono Trigger was released on... Okay, so this is later. So the original Super NES edition of Chrono Trigger was released on the Wii download service Virtual Console in Japan on April 26th of 2011, in the US on May 16th, 2011, and in Europe on May 20th of 2011. Previously, in April of 2008, a Nintendo Power reader poll had identified Chrono Trigger as the third most wanted game for the Virtual Console. The game has also been ported to iMode, the PlayStation Network, iOS, Android, and Windows. So for the PlayStation version, Square re-released an enhanced port of Chrono Trigger developed by Tosei in Japan for the PlayStation in 1999. Square timed its release before that of Chrono Cross, the 1999 sequel to Chrono Trigger, to familiarize players with the story leading up to it. So the new version includes an animated cutscene created by original character designer Akira Toriyama's Bird Studio and animated by Toei Animation, as well as several bonus features accessible after achieving various endings in the game. Scenarist Masato Kato attended planning meetings at Bird Studio to discuss how the ending cutscenes would illustrate subtle ties to Chrono Cross. The port was released in North America in 2001, along with a newly translated version of Final Fantasy IV, and it came out as a package, so again as Final Fantasy Chronicles. So reviewers criticized Chronicles for its lengthy load times and absence of new in-game features. This same iteration was also re-released as a downloadable game on the PlayStation Network on October 4th of 2011 for the PlayStation 3, PlayStation Vita, and PlayStation Portable. So yeah, so that version there, the version is fine. It's a pretty good port overall. The loading though sucks, right? And especially like in an old school JRPG, it is annoying. And so for that reason there, I wouldn't really recommend that one there. But everything else is fine on it, right? It's just, again, the loading. But then there was a Nintendo DS version. So on July 2nd of 2008, Square Enix announced that they were planning to bring Chrono Trigger to the Nintendo DS handheld platform. Composer Yasunori Mitsuda was pleased with the project, exclaiming, "Finally, after receiving the news from Square Enix and maintaining it's still a very deep, very high quality game, even when you play it today, I'm still interested in seeing what kids think about it when they play it." So Square retained Masato Kato to oversee the port and Tosei to program it. Kato explained, "I wanted it to be based on the original Super NES release rather than the PlayStation version. I thought we should look at additional elements from the PlayStation version, re-examine and rework them to make it a complete edition." That's how it struck me, and I told staff later on so also. Square Enix touted the game by displaying Akira Toriyama's original art at the 2008 Tokyo Game Show. The DS re-release contains all the bonus material from the PlayStation port, as well as other enhancements. So the added features include a more accurate and revised translation by Tom Slattery, a dual screen mode which clears the top screen of all menus, a self-completing map screen, and a default run option. It also features the options to choose between two control schemes, one mirroring the original Super NES controls and the other making use of the DS's touchscreen. Masato Kato's participated in development, overseeing the addition of the Monster Battling Arena, 2 new areas, the Lost Sanctum and the Dimensional Vortex, and a new ending that further foreshadows the events of Chrono Cross. One of the areas within the Vortex uses the Singing Mountain song that was featured on the original Chrono Trigger soundtrack. Additionally, one of the dungeons absent from the original game was remade within the Vortex. These new dungeons met with mixed reviews. GameSpot called them frustrating and repetitive, while IGN noted that the extra quests and the game context connect extremely well. It was a nominee for Best RPG for the Nintendo DS in IGN's 2008 Video Game Awards. The Nintendo DS version of Chrono Trigger was the 22nd best-selling game of 2008 in Japan. So it was a cell phone version created in Japan on iMode distribution services on August 25th of 2011. And then there was an iOS version released on December 8th of 2011. And so this version is based on the Nintendo DS version with graphics optimized for iOS. The game was later released for Android on October 29th of 2012. And an update incorporated most of the features of the Windows version, including the reintroduction of the animated cutscenes, which was absent from the initial mobile release, was released on February 27th of 2018 for both iOS and Android. And so for Windows, so Square Enix released Chrono Trigger without an announcement for Windows via Steam on February 27th of 2018. This version includes most of the content from the Nintendo DS besides the arena mode, as well as the higher resolution graphics from the mobile device releases. Support for mouse and keyboard control and autosave features, along with additional content such as wallpaper and music. The PC port initially received a negative reception due to its inferior graphical quality, additional glitches, UI adapted for touchscreens, and failure to properly adapt the control scheme for keyboards and controllers. In response, Square Enix provided various UI updates and several other improvements, including adding an original graphics option based on the game's original release, fixing glitches introduced, and adding a true 16:9 widescreen presentation for the first time, and to address the aforementioned complaints. In total, 5 major releases were released, the first on April 10th of 2018 and the last on August 3rd of 2018, all which have substantially improved upon its release. On March 11th of 2022, a 6th major patch was released. It added Ultra 21.9 support and other quality of life features and improvements. So which one is the one to play? If you're wanting to get into Chrono Trigger, you've never played it before, which version is the one that would be best played? I mean, the Super Nintendo one, the original one, is certainly not a bad version to play. It's some of the translations is a bit off, and like I mentioned earlier, right? I mean, the dude had like a month, right, to work on it, but it still has a certain charm to it, especially the way Frog speaks, as he speaks in a very Shakespearean way, like saying like, who art thou, or I will fight thee, and so it definitely gives his character a lot of charm to it. That was kind of later, changed in some of the later translations, but it's it's definitely not a bad version to play. The only thing is that specific version right there, unless you were tracking down the original cartridge, right, if you still have a Super Nintendo, would be kind of difficult to play, as it's not available on any of the modern platforms now, and but it emulates well, right? So there's certainly that route you can go. The Nintendo DS version is a pretty nice version to play. I haven't gotten too much into it, but it's pretty nice overall. Again, it has a more, I guess you can say, more of a polished script, although, again, Frog loses some of his charm. He still speaks kind of like in a way that sounds a little old-fashioned, but, not quite as, like, Shakespearean, I guess, as the original one. But overall, though, I mean, it's still a really great port of the game. Some of the new features are cool, I guess, but you can take them or leave it, right? I don't really care for them that much, but everything else is really great. The only thing about it, though, is that it's stuck on the handheld, right? That is no longer in production, right? So again, if you were tracking down an original copy of these games, whether it fits on the DS or on the Super Nintendo, I haven't looked up the prices for them in a while, but my understanding is that they're probably going to be pretty expensive. So, just something to keep in mind. And actually, as I'm talking here, I can see if I can pull up what the prices are on them. But there's those versions there. The next ones are going to be for the ones that are going to be just, I guess, more accessible are the iOS or the Android ports. Now, for those versions there, because I have them on the, I have the Android version, and I gotta say, it's they use like this kind of like this filter that it kind of smooths out the sprites, which I don't like when they do that. And I mean, but it is kind of nice that it has widescreen support, but then like the UI and the text boxes, so like the font is very like clean looking, which kind of doesn't mesh well with the graphics too either, right? But it does have some decent quality of life features, like for example, like an auto battle option, right? And it's also the more easily accessible one. You can play it on your phone, or if you have any number of Android devices. Although I will say though, and I think this got fixed though, but there was a stretch there where on some of my more newer Android devices, so for example, my newer phone or like the Odin 2, the game had a lot of like glitches, and so like for example, the colors would look really washed out. The game would not load properly. So I was like, oh well. So I pretty much had already deemed that version unplayable on like my more modern devices. But fairly recently, though, I did just kind of try to boot it up the other day, and it booted up okay. So, but I didn't really notice that there was an update done on it. So, so it seems to be fixed, but just proceed with caution if you're buying Chrono Trigger. If you have like a more newer phone, right, or like the Odin 2 or Retroid Pocket 4, right, like, devices like that, right, that you may run into some glitches on it. I can't really speak for the iOS version. I haven't played that version there. But for me personally, where I first beat this game, because I've owned this game in several, like I bought it back on the Wii console back in the day, and then I have the Nintendo DS version, and then I have this game emulated on a lot of different devices, the Super Nintendo version, and then I have the Android one. But then I also ended up getting it on Steam, on my Steam Deck, and I will say that's actually where I ended up beating the game. And so that's based off of the Windows version. And, I actually like that port, because I got the game after they had done a lot of the updates, like I said earlier, and it played pretty well. I really like the port. It still keeps the kind of pixelated look, and along with the font as well, too. So it doesn't have that really clean looking font that the Android versions have. And so overall, I really like that port. There was just one thing about it, though, and I don't know if it can be fixed through patches or just like mods of some sort, but whenever you're moving diagonally on the screen kind of stutters a bit, and it looks kind of juddery, and so I didn't really like that too much. But again, it only really does it when you're moving diagonally up, diagonally in one direction or the other. And so just something to keep in mind on that version there. Again, there might be versions or ways you can fix it. I know with PC games, there's a lot of mods you can add to it. I just didn't go around and try to search for that. But I was still able to beat the game and that way. And, I still appreciate it for what it is. So it was kind of nice playing it on, my Steam Deck. But okay, so here we go. So if you were to try to buy this game on the Super Nintendo, so the original cartridge. So a loose copy would run you $265.85. I'm getting these prices from pricecharting.com. A complete copy would run you back $889.99. A brand new copy would be $2,848. A graded copy, if you happen to have a copy that was graded, it was $20,325. Wow. The box itself, I'm assuming in good condition, would be $250, and then the manual, $84.33. So that's the Super Nintendo version. On the Nintendo DS, so actually not quite as bad, but a loose copy for the Nintendo DS is $81.25. A complete copy is $118.01. Brand new, it'd be $203.03. A graded copy would only run you $250, $46.40 for the box, and $37.40 for the manual. So, there you go. Reception on this game was just overall, this game was unanimously pretty well beloved. So the Super Nintendo version, it got on game rankings, it's 96%. The DS version, so from game rankings and Metacritic, a 92% and 92 out of 100. Across the board, right? The Super Nintendo one was pretty well beloved. Edge magazine only gave it a 7 out of 10, though, but pretty much everywhere else, it was like at least an 8 to a 10, 8 out of 10, or, a 10 out of 10. Let's see, Electronic Gaming Monthly, which was like the big magazine back in the day, so they gave it a 9 out of 10. So there was the 4 reviewers, right? 9 out of 10. 9.5 out of 10, 9.5 out of 10, and 9 out of 10. Famitsu magazine at the time, they gave it so this is that popular Japanese publication, so they give it an 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10, and 9 out of 10. Game Informer gave it a 9.25 out of 10, and GamePro gave it a 20 out of 20. They don't have Game Fan magazine on here. That was a magazine that I would always read, so I'll see if I can post up like one of their reviews up on the screen here. But for publications, so Electronic Gaming Monthly gave it the best Super Nintendo game, the best role-playing game, and the best music in a cartridge-based game. GamePro gave it the best RPG game, and Nintendo Power Awards gave it the best Super NES game, best epic game, best story, best ending, coolest transportation with Epoch, and the worst baddie, character juggler. So, yeah. So the Chrono Trigger received critical acclaim upon its Super NES release. The game received praise, or the gameplay received praise with Nintendo Power and Next Generation considering it innovative. Both magazines and Superplay cited the visibility of characters in the overworld map and the use of combos as reasons for their enjoyment. Both Edge and GamePro felt the game was easier than Final Fantasy VI, though GamePro enjoyed it nonetheless. And yeah, that's Chrono Trigger. It's, it has a challenge. I mean, there can be moments that are a bit challenging. There's one particular boss I remember that did give me a bit of a hard time. But once you figure out the mechanics and all, and some of the the techniques you can use, or even some of the your accessories that you can use, then there's definitely ways to kind of make things easier. But in general, it's not too difficult of a game, which again kind of lends to its sort of user-friendly nature of the game overall. The graphics and music received praise by Nintendo Power, Electronic Gaming Monthly, and Nintendo Magazine Systems. GamePro found them better than in prior role-playing games such as Final Fantasy VI, and Game Informer felt that the graphical upgrades shortened the quest, though Edge considered them lacking Final Fantasy VI's grandness. Evaluation of the story and characters were more mixed. The critics for Electronic Gaming Monthly generally found the story line compelling, and Game Informer felt that the character arcs were well developed. Next Generation and Superplay disagreed. They both negatively compared the story arcs to Final Fantasy VI, with Superplay finding Frog's story to be the only meaningful one. Because in the game, as you're going through the game, just if you're just doing the main quest, there's I felt that the characters were really charming, right? And you do definitely get into them. Frog is definitely one of the more, I guess, developed characters, I guess you can say. But the game, though, there's a certain point in the game where you can start doing a lot of side content, and a lot of the side content is really character specific, right? That helps develop the characters more, so which I feel really appealing. And so I actually kind of contribute that to Mass Effect 2. So on Mass Effect, you have your main storyline, but then there's a side story or side missions that you can do for pretty much each of the characters that are specific to that character, and it really fleshes out their whole backstory, motives, and everything a lot more. I kind of felt like that with Chrono Trigger in a sense, right? Not quite as in depth, because again, this is a game from the 4th generation, but kind of in that aspect, right? And so you don't have to do them, but you get some pretty cool rewards, and then also, like I said, right, just fleshes out the overall story more along with the characters themselves. So, and I felt for the most part they were all pretty well written, given the time that again we're working in here, right? Again, back in 1995, and so I kind of disagree with that statement there. I'm not going to say they're the best written characters of all time, with really complex story narratives and all, but they're fun enough to explore, and again, again, Chrono Trigger benefits from its simplicity, right? The characters aren't overly complex, but they're extremely charming, and so because of that, it makes it worth exploring the backstory, and you do get a good sense of who these characters are, and that you feel a connection to them, is I guess basically what I'm trying to say. So as far as sales goes, so the game was a bestseller in Japan, where 2 million copies were sold in only 2 months. It ended the year as the second best-selling game in 1995, just below Dragon Quest VI, Realms of Revelation. So Dragon Quest VI was still a crazy seller, and that's because Dragon Quest VI was known as kind of one of the weaker games in that series. But Chrono Trigger was also met with substantial success upon release in North America, and its re-release on the PlayStation as part of the Final Fantasy Chronicles package topped the NPD TRSTS PlayStation sales charts for over 6 weeks. By March of 2003, the game's Super NES and PS1 iterations had shipped 2.65 million copies worldwide, including 2.36 million in Japan and 290 abroad. The PlayStation version was re-released in 2003 as part of Sony's Greatest Hit line. The original Super NES version had sold 2.5 million copies by 2006. The Chrono Trigger DS sold 790,000 copies worldwide as of March of 2009, including 490 in Japan, 240 in North America, and 60,000 in Europe. The Super Nintendo, PlayStation 1, and DS versions shipped a combined 3.44 million copies worldwide. By March of 2009, excluding the PC versions, the game had shipped over 3.5 million copies worldwide by February of 2018. As of March of 2025, all versions together have shipped more than 5 million copies worldwide. So again, So Chrono Trigger is frequently listed amongst the greatest video games of all time. In 1997, Electronic Gaming Monthly ranked it its 29th best console video game of all time, while noting that it was not as good as Final Fantasy VI, which ranked 9th. They gave superlative praise for its handling of time traveling and its combat engine. Although, funnily enough, I personally like Final Fantasy VI just a slight hair more. In perspective, to put into perspective, for me personally, Final Fantasy VI is my 5th favorite game of all time. Chrono Trigger is my 6th, right? And so, I mean, really, they're almost neck and neck. It's just a few things that I prefer about Final Fantasy VI. But it seemed like at the time that was sort of the sentiment too. But I've noticed that more recently, Chrono Trigger seems to be the one that is more beloved by people, more so than Final Fantasy VI. So, you know, again, that's just a feel that I get from conversations that I see, you know, when these games are discussed. But let's see. It has placed highly on all 6 multimedia websites of IGN's top 100 games of all time list. 4th in 2002, 6th in early 2005, 13th in late 2005, 2nd in 2006, 18th in 2007, and 2nd in 2008. So Game Informer called it its 15th favorite game in 2001. Its staff thought that it was the best non-Final Fantasy game Square has produced at the time. GameSpot included Chrono Trigger in the greatest game of all time list, released in April 2006. And it also appeared 28th on an all-time 100 list poll conducted by Japanese magazine Famitsu of the same year. In 2004, Chrono Trigger finished runner-up to Final Fantasy VII in the inaugural GameFAQs video game battles. Video game battle. Let's see, in 2008, readers Denki Online voted it the 8th best game ever made. Nintendo Power's 20th anniversary issue named it the 5th best Super Nintendo game. In 2009, official Nintendo magazine ranked the DS version as the DS version of the game 31st on the list of greatest Nintendo games of all time. In 2012, it came 32nd place on Game Radar's 100 best games of all time and first place for its best JRPG list. And Games Radar named Chrono Trigger the 2nd best Super Nintendo game of all time behind Super Metroid. In 2023, Time Extension included the game on their all-time best JRPG list. And so, yeah, you know, like I said, yeah, it's it definitely left a legacy, right? Let's see. So for add-ons, so Chrono Trigger inspired several related releases. The first were 3 games released for the Satellaview in 1995. They included Chrono Trigger, Jet Bike Special, a racing game based on the minigame from the original. Oh, I didn't know that. So Chrono Trigger Character Library features profiles on characters and monsters of the game. Chrono Trigger Music Library, a collection of music from the game soundtrack. The contents of Character Library and Music Library were later included as extras in the PlayStation re-release of Chrono Trigger. Production IG created a 16-minute OVA dimensional adventure Numa Monhar, which was shown at the Japanese V-Jump Festival in 1996. So for fan games, there have been 2 notable attempts by Chrono Trigger fans to unofficially remake ports of the game for PC with a 3D graphics engine. Chrono Resurrection, an attempt at remaking 10 small interactive cutscenes from Chrono Trigger, and Chrono Trigger Remake Project, which sought to remake the entire game, were forcibly terminated by Square Enix by way of cease and desist order. Another group of fans created a sequel via ROM hack of Chrono Trigger called Chrono Trigger Crimson Echoes, developed from 2004 to 2009. Although feature-length and virtually finished, it was also terminated through a cease and desist letter days before its May 2009 release. The letter also forbade the dissemination of existing Chrono Trigger ROM hacks and documentation. After the cease and desist were issued, an incomplete version of the game was leaked in May of 2009, though due to its early state of the game, playability was limited. This was followed by a more complete ROM leak in January 2011, which allowed the game to be played from beginning to end. And so, sequels. So did get a sequel, Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross, which, you know, many of you might be familiar with. But Square released a related Satellaview game in 1986 named Radical Dreamers. Having thought that Trigger ended with unfinished business, scenarist Masato Kato wrote and directed the game. Dreamers functioned as a side story to Chrono Trigger, resolving a loose subplot from its predecessor. A short, text-based game relying on minimal graphics and atmospheric music. The game never received an official release outside of Japan, though it was translated by fans to English in April of 2003. Square planned to release Radical Dreamers as an Easter egg in the PlayStation edition of Chrono Trigger, but Kato was unhappy with his work and halted its inclusion. Square released Chrono Cross for the PlayStation in 1999. Cross is a sequel to Chrono Trigger featuring a new setting and cast of characters. Presenting the theme of parallel worlds, the story followed protagonist Surge, a teen boy thrust into an alternate reality in which he died years earlier. With the help of a thief named Kid, Surge endeavors to discover the truth behind his apparent death and obtain the Frozen Flame, a mythical artifact. Regarded by writer and director Masato Kato as an effort to redo Radical Dreamers properly, Chrono Cross borrowed certain themes, scenarios, characters, and settings from Dreamers. Yasunori Mitsuda also adapted certain songs from Radical Dreamers while scoring Cross. Radical Dreamers was consequently removed from the series' main continuity, considered an alternate dimension. Chrono Cross shipped 1.5 million copies and was widely praised by critics. There are no plans as of 2025 for a new title, despite a statement from Hironobu Sakaguchi in 2001 that developers of Chrono Cross wanted to make a new Chrono game. The same year, Square applied a trademark for the names Chrono Break in the United States and Chrono Break spelled B-R-E-A-K in the United States, and Chrono Break, but that one is spelled B-R-A-K-E in Japan. However, the United States trademark was dropped in 2003. Director Takashi Tokita mentioned Chrono Trigger 2 in a 2003 interview, which has not been translated in English. Yuji Horii expressed no interest in returning to the Chrono franchise in 2005, while Hironobu Sakaguchi remarked in April of 2007 that his creation, Blue Dragon, was an extension of Chrono Trigger. Because Blue Dragon, that saw the return of Hironobu Sakaguchi with Akira Toriyama's artwork. But during a Cubed interview on February 1st of 2007, Square Enix's senior vice president, Hiromichi Tanaka, said that although no sequel is currently planned, some sort of sequel is still possible if the Chrono Cross developers can reunite. Yasunori Mitsuda has expressed interest in scoring a new game, but he warned there are a lot of politics involved in the series. He stressed that Masato Kato should participate in development. The February 2008 issue of Game Informer ranked the Chrono series 8th amongst the top 10 sequels in demand, naming the game's steadfast legacies in Square Enix catalog, and asking, what's the damn holdup? In Electronic Gaming Monthly's June 2008 retro issue, writer Jeremy Parrish cited Chrono as a video game franchise that fans would be most thrilled to see a sequel to. In the first May Famitsu magazine in 2009, Chrono Trigger placed 14th out of the 50th in a vote for most wanted sequels by the magazine's readers. At E3 2009, Square Enix senior vice president Shinji Hashimoto remarked that the people want a sequel, they should buy more. In July of 2010, Obsidian entertainment designer Virgas Urquhart replied to an interview question about what franchises would he like to work on, said that if he could come across everything that he had played, he would choose a Chrono Trigger game. At the time, Obsidian was making Dungeon Siege 3 for Square Enix. Urquhart said, you make RPGs, we make RPGs, it would be great to see what we could do together. And they really wanted to start getting into Western RPGs. And so it all kind of ended up fitting there. Yoshinori Kitase stated that he used time travel mechanics of Chrono Trigger as a starting point for Final Fantasy 13-2. And so then more recently, right, as far as any kind of like thing that might come out for Chrono Trigger on the remake, so it's been heavily rumored. The last rumors that I saw on this, so going back in 2000, towards the end of 2025, so just last year, so Yuji Horii, so my understanding, I haven't kept up with this too much, but Yuji Horii has been kind of known to let things slip, right, in interviews and shows that he's done. And so, for example, like I think some years ago they had asked him about like if there's going to be like a remakes of Dragon Quest games or something like that. And he said, oh, don't ask me that. I get in trouble a lot for talking. Something to that effect. And then shortly afterwards, right, a few years later, we got Dragon Quest remakes 1, 2, and 3, right? The HD2D remakes, which are excellent. Well, last year, kind of the same, right? That somebody had asked him in some kind of a show that he was doing. Somebody in the audience asked him, I was like, hey, can you tell us anything about a Chrono Trigger remake? So he kind of like got all cheesy about it. And he said, no, don't ask me. I get in trouble for saying things. So kind of the same thing, right? And then also more recently, there was, let me see if I can look it up real quick so I can kind of get my information right. Let's see. All right, here we go. So this is this happened a few months ago. So this is this is an article that's on Vice.com. But the story was, I actually talked about it on my podcast like about 3 months ago. So basically, Chrono Trigger remake or remaster already in development, according to a leak. So is a Chrono Trigger remake finally happening? A reliable industry insider claims Chrono stuff is in development at Square Enix. So it's been almost 30 years since the original 1995 launch of Chrono Trigger, and many fans are more than ready for a modern remake or contemporary HD 2D take on the classic game. New comments from a reliable industry insider seem to suggest that something is already in the works for Chrono Trigger at Square Enix. So a recent Reset Era thread saw the community discussing a survey from Square Enix Team Asano gauging interest on what Square Enix titles fans would like to see remade in the future. So Team Asano, I believe that they're the developers that have been doing like the Octopath Traveler games, right? The HD 2D games, which is kind of what people are, that seems to be the more popular sentiment on how people would want to see Chrono Trigger remade. And I do agree with that. That's how I would want to see it. But the responses to the thread discussed many people or many different properties and titles, but Chrono Trigger was definitely a popular mention. That's where longtime reliable insider John Harker chimed in. In response to one of the comments suggesting Chrono Trigger, John Harker said, the Chrono stuff is already in development though. Let's ask for something else like opening back up Triangle Strategy 2 or a legit sequel to Final Fantasy Tactics. So the thread quickly lit up with excitement and surprise at Harker's comment that Chrono stuff, so quote-unquote Chrono stuff, is already in development. There were no additional details provided, so it's unclear if the leaker is referencing a full Final Fantasy VII style 3D remake or something in the HD 2D style. There's no clear consensus from the Chrono Trigger fan community about which style of remake would be the best fit. Some fans think the game puzzles would perfectly translate to 3D environments, while others feel that the game's original art and style are what made it special and that a remake should stay closer to the source material. This comment from John Harker adds on speculation and rumors that began towards the end of 2025, around the Chrono Trigger's 30th anniversary, during a YouTube stream in November 2025. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. Dragon Quest creator Yuji Horii was asked if all the recent Chrono Trigger 30th anniversary projects and events are hinting that a remake is in the works. His response didn't confirm a project, but he didn't deny something. He didn't deny something was in the works. So quote unquote, he's like, I can't say. You shouldn't ask that. I get told off. I'll get told off. That definitely is far from a confirmation, but it was enough to get fans excited and further fuel speculation. So again, not anything 100% confirmed, but it seems like something's in the works, right? And, again, things, when things don't get announced, right, or sometimes things get leaked, sometimes it's, potentially that something was in the works, right? And all it's just, behind the scenes, so things get canceled or whatnot, right? Kind of like what's been happening with Final Fantasy IX. That project is supposedly, on ice is the last thing that, Nate the Hate said. So it seems like something is in the works, but who knows, right? Maybe it's going through developmental hell. We have no idea. And I mean, I feel like we'll get something at some point. Like Chrono Trigger is such a monumental game that, I mean, yes, it wasn't like the biggest seller, right? But I feel like it has enough cultural relevance that they got to do something with it, because there's been a lot of other games that they've remade or remastered that, that didn't sell as well or don't have that cultural significance, right? Like Live Alive, for example. Now, that's cool that they released that game because it was kind of an obscure Super Nintendo, or I should say more Super Famicom RPG, but they remade that, right? So if you're doing that, why not Chrono Trigger, And so hopefully they'll announce something, but as of right now, nothing's been confirmed, right? So, there's some reason to get excited for it, but at the same time, I also wouldn't hold my breath completely. But at the very least, just re-release the game. Hell, I would even take it wouldn't be the most ideal, but at least release it on the Nintendo Switch Online, something. But I can imagine because between Yuji Horii, Akira Toriyama's artwork and all that. There's some like licensing issues with trying to bring that game back. I have no idea, but yeah, but Chrono Trigger. So like I said a little bit earlier, we got this game. We rented this game back when our buddy of mine and my brothers, he would have the Super Nintendo, so he would bring it over. And we had just played Final Fantasy VI, right? And we were just outstanded by that game. And so here's another game that they were talking about was almost, just as good, if not better and all. And so I remember renting this game, and yeah, we fell in love with it right away. One of the things that I remember a lot about this game is just how much the music just stuck in my head. And even to this day, right? We already talked about the music is truly incredible. But just overall, the charm of this game, the very easy pick up and play nature about it, you'll just have such a fun time with this game, even if you're not into JRPGs, because the game is so well paced. Its battle system is really quick and it's really fun. Its story moves along at a pretty brisk pace, but in a way where it's not wasting your time, and everything feels like it's there for a reason, right? Even like the side content and all really fleshes out the characters more. And it's such a well-paced game. It's not a very long game. I mean, you can probably beat it like in, I don't know, 15, 20 hours or so, I would say, give or take, if it's like your first run through. So it's not an incredibly long game. You don't really need a grind in the game. As long as you're not avoiding all the enemies, you'll be perfectly fine with just fighting the enemies that are on screen there. And so everything about the game feels like it's really well paced. There's no I can't think of like a boring moment in the game. So those 20 hours, you're really being treated to like just an incredible time, right? With this, if you're into JRPGs, or like I said, even if you're not, you should give it a shot. And I think those are some of the reasons that just make this game truly a classic standout. The fight, the jumping between the different eras and all gives this game a certain epic feel to it and all. But just when you look at the characters, their dialogue, their banter between each other, and just the overall charm of the world, definitely gives it that kind of Dragon Quest vibe as well too. But when you're going on this very epic mission to, confront an evil bad guy, even though it makes it feel like Final Fantasy also, right? Like I said, it's a blending of both together. If you like Dragon Quest games and if you like Final Fantasy games, this truly is like the best fusion of these two games that we could have ever hoped for. And I think that's a big part of the reason why this game is just so well beloved and just a true classic for the ages. I'll never get that soundtrack out of my head. It's definitely just kind of lives rent free in there, and just a really magical time when this game came out. And truly glad that I got to experience it back then when it first came out. But that's what I got here for Chrono Trigger. Hopefully, at the very least, that gave you some information on the game, or at least maybe makes you want to replay the game again. And so hopefully we'll get a remake soon. But at the very least, we do have this original one that we can always go back to. But next week, if I'm still on schedule, so we're jumping over to another generation, so the 5th generation, and I'm going to do this one on Virtua Fighter. And so I may go into Virtua Fighter 2 also, but at the very least, definitely Virtua Fighter, the first one, as I feel like this is one of not the first 3D game, obviously, but I think it was one of the first 3D games, though, that really started showing just what is capable of being done with 3D games. And it was not only, I think, really helped revolutionize the fighting game genre, but also just 3D graphics in general. And so we'll get more into that next week, again, assuming if I'm on schedule. But until then, hope you have an amazing week. Take care of yourselves and have a great one. Till the next.